Regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Deputy City Clerk Kevin Christensen, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Hopkins.
Here.
Commissioner Khan.
Here.
Commissioner Quincy.
Here.
Commissioner Shoresman.
Here.
Commissioner Wilkin.
Here.
Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Here.
Chair Dondekar.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that commissioners are present through teleconferencing. I'd like to remind my fellow commissioners and staff to help us reduce background noise by muting your phone or microphone unless you're speaking. The first item, do we have a flag so we can do the pledge? Mike Wilkins, Commissioner Wilkins, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkin. The first item on our agenda are the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of February 24th, 2021. If anyone has comments on the minutes before us, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself. I see no one wishing to make any changes in the minutes, in which case, do I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval.
Commissioner Quincy makes the motion.
I'll second.
Commissioner Wilkins second. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion?
Commissioner Quincy.
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Khan.
Yes.
Commissioner Shoresman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Chair Dondekar.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. At this time, we'll hear any public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the Commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. As you can see on the screen, participants of the webinar may submit a question containing their name and the item number they wish to speak on. Once public comments for that item is opened, your microphone will be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
This is Deputy Clerk Christian. Just a slight modification. The attendees may raise their virtual hands if they would like to speak. The question option is no longer available.
I see.
So we'll give them a few seconds. We have quite a few people in attendance so far. I don't see any hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Do you want to give them directions as to how to raise the hand?
Or it should be, depending on which version of Zoom you're using, you will have either at the bottom of your screen a control panel that allows you to you raise your hand, or in some cases it may be at the top right.
Thank you.
I see no hands raised for items to speak on items not on the agenda.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Consultant and project presentations are limited to 6 minutes. The second item on our agenda is a public hearing item to review a project located at 1320 Roundhouse Street. Would Senior Planner Brian Lavelle please present the report? I believe Mr. Fukushima is going to be joining you in this presentation.
That's correct, Chair Dandekar. Good evening. Let me just see if I can pull up this item here. Okay. Well, again, good evening. It's good to be with you, Chair and Commissioners. To lead off this item, item number 2, this is a scoping meeting for the Commission and public to provide comments to be considered with the preparation of the environmental impact report for the Lausanne Central Coast Layover Facility project. Just briefly, I'll go over what's going to be covered on this item tonight, kind of the procedures here. I'll start off providing some background, the purpose of the meeting. I'll show some aerial photos, some site photos, go into a little bit on the surrounding land uses. I'll briefly highlight some of the key features in the conceptual plan, and then I'll provide a brief update of some of the comments that city staff's already provided, and then the city's role going forward. And then, as you mentioned, I'll hand off briefly to Adam Fukushima, the city's active transportation manager, and he'll go over the transportation improvements associated with the project. And then we can hear from James Campbell. He's the manager of operations with the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency. He also has HDR, his consultant team, available. They may provide additional information, and they are available to answer, of course, the more technical type questions. After that, the Commission can certainly open public comment, ask any questions of staff, the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency or their consultants, and then go through the process of hearing public input and providing comments to the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency to consider for EIR preparation. So just for some brief background, the current layover facility is at the San Luis Obispo Rail Station, and this is the northern terminus of the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner service. One train holds overnight for an early morning departure the following day. The layover facility relocation and expansion projects intended to provide storage and maintenance capacity for additional trains to hold overnight and to allow a second morning departure from San Luis Obispo. The expanded facility will also allow for future further expansion of service. An initial study was not prepared for the project. All issue areas are going to be studied within the environmental impact report. The purpose of this meeting is for the public and the Commission to provide input on issue areas that should be studied in detail in the EIR, as well as to discuss potential alternatives and mitigation measures. Lausanne is the lead agency for this project, and the city does not have any zoning or discretionary authority over this project. And just for a brief overview of the site, it's approximately 8.3 acres. It's in the area west of the Union Pacific main tracks, known as the Roundhouse site. It's zoned service commercial with historic overlay. It's pretty much in the center of the Railroad Historic District. The site is bordered predominantly by multifamily development to the west that fronts Emily Street, Victoria Avenue, Humbert Avenue, and Lawrence Drive. East of the site, across the tracks and Railroad Safety Trail, is a single family development in the vicinity of Bushnell and Bishop Streets. The San Luis Obispo Rail Museum is at the north end of the project site, And at the far south end of the project site is bordered by manufacturing zoned uses and multifamily development just to the west. And just to briefly go through some site photos, I've included a aerial photo on the left to try to orient a little bit where these photos are taken from, just since it is such a expansive site. So this is looking just past that Roundhouse Street terminus to the north towards the Railroad Museum facility. And here's a view to the south from that same approximate location at the terminus of Roundhouse Street. You can see the multifamily development there that's to the west of the project site, and a little bit of the remnants of the turntable from the Roundhouse building that was once there. And looking across the site to the northeast towards Bushnell and Bishop Streets, single family development in that area. And then more of a southeast direction from Roundhouse Street, more towards the San Carlos area. And then looking a couple of photos here with the multifamily development close to where the historic turntable feature was. Some multifamily development there, just looking towards the west, and then looking more towards the north along the west edge of the site. And then more towards the southerly end of the site, this is the view to the north from where Francis Street terminates at the site. And I'll just provide a brief overview of the main features of the concept plan shown here. James Campbell and his team will provide a more detailed overview of the project, including operationally, just more how the site overall functions. Just for the main features, there's 5 new tracks. There'd be 3 storage tracks, a service and inspection track, as well as a wash track. There's a number of single-story structures. There's an operations building for administrative offices, maintenance shops building for welding, fabrication, and for use for a parts storeroom. There's the MOW, or maintenance of way building, for inspection and maintenance of track. There's the wash building, which is a fully enclosed automatic train wash building of about 10,000 square feet. And that's more towards the far north end of the project site. There's a wheel truing building at the north end of the site as well that houses an underfloor pit-mounted wheel truing machine. And then there's a couple of shelter structures that would be along the tracks as well. There's a 54 site parking lot for 54 spaces and a parking lot that's accessed from Roundhouse Street. And then emergency access would be provided from the train museum parking lot at the north end of the site. At the center of the site, emergency access would be from Alfonso Street, and then Francis Street at the south end of the site. Just for department comments provided to date, this is just a brief summary. Transportation Division has provided some comments on the bicycle path, specifically regarding the design and dimensions of those features. They've also provided comments about the need to be able to continue to accommodate a future overcrossing features at Roundhouse and at Francis Streets. They've provided comments on bike pathway lighting, as well as traffic control measure issues. Community Development has stressed the importance of considering neighborhood compatibility issues, specifically light, noise, vibration, emissions, odors. We've discussed fencing compatibility issues, just making sure that that's something that's compatible with the railroad district and the nearby residential areas. And then the site is an important historic site as well. It's a site of the Roundhouse. There's the turntable feature remnants are there. And then the site has the ability to tie into the Railroad Museum and the rest of the historic district as well. Staff suggested that it's a good opportunity to provide interpretive exhibits, public information, and then community development staff has talked with LoSAN about the design of buildings, the need to consider the railroad district plan as far as architectural features, building massing, site features, et cetera. And then staff's also commented on the importance to evaluate cultural resource impacts in that area and to consult with tribal leaders due to the potential amount of excavation in the area. At this point, I'll go ahead and hand this over briefly to Adam Fukushima, our Active Transportation Manager.
Thank you, Brian. And what I'll do is I'll start off with just talking about how this facility fits within our wider active transportation plan, which was just adopted by council just about a month ago. We have a lot of projects in the vicinity of this project, and so there's mutual benefits of such a facility. First of all, I'll mention the railroad safety trail on the east side of the tracks. This our existing portion from Orcutt Road to the railroad station is the most highly used portion of shared use path in the city. We get over 400 pedestrians using it per day, and we actually get more pedestrian use than we do bicycle use, which is just under that number. We get a lot of people who use it not only as a transportation facility, but also as a recreation facility for a lot of the neighbors who live there, including dog walkers and strollers and things of that nature. And we've heard from residents on the west side of the tracks that there's a need for a railroad safety trail on that side as well. We have a growing community of neighbors who live along Francis and Victoria Street, and they say that the railroad provides a barrier to getting to the park at Sinsheimer Park, as well as to other locations north, and that a facility there would help provide give them more recreation as well as transportation options. What I'll do is I'll go through what the plan shows as proposed projects as they are relevant to this project. So on the west side of the tracks is proposed a shared use path, a lot like the one that's on the east side. You see that in the dashed green line that goes through it, that starts at McMillan Street in the south and extends all the way to the Amtrak station in the north. Some other projects there I should mention as well too is there's a proposed crossing of the railroad tracks at Francis to get across to Sinsheimer Park. This is a bike and pedestrian only crossing, as well as a bike and pedestrian only crossing at Roundhouse leading to Bishop Street. Also, I should mention that this project would take advantage of a proposed neighborhood greenway on Victoria Street, which is represented by the pink line on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there, and that leads to a new pedestrian crossing that will be that will begin construction this summer across Broad Street, and that'll help provide connections to Meadow Park. So there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of benefits for providing a shared use path along this area. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. This shows the shared use path as it goes. Interesting. I had a line here showing where the path goes, and I'm not seeing it right now. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. So this slide shows where the path would go through the project. I'd like to apologize to LoSAN for stealing a little bit of their thunder. I'm showing some of their project as it is, but the project as LoSAN is proposing it is to build a portion of that shared use path as part of their project. And it would begin at Francis Street and extend north to High Street. And this would provide the only bike and pedestrian only connection north to get to High Street for the residents who live in the Victoria Francis neighborhoods there. So it'll be an important connection for them. Another thing is, while they're only building the shared use path, we've asked that the design of the shared use path not preclude building a crossing of the railroad tracks at Roundhouse Street and also at Francis Avenue. And so you see the yellow arrows there representing where those crossings would be, and we've asked that the design of their path would allow for us to later someday on our own, this would be our own project, to build those crossings to get to the other side and provide access to the park, which would be a very big amenity to the community there. Okay. All right. And then go to the next slide. And also just want to talk about the wider transportation benefits of this facility. Like I said, it will be the first segment of the railroad safety trail on the west side of the tracks. It would allow us sort of to start that conversation about building the crossings to the east side and to the park, like I mentioned. Also want to mention the benefits to the Amtrak station we have here now. We are very lucky in that our city has an Amtrak station very close to downtown. It's just 6 short blocks to downtown. A lot of cities along the Pacific Surfliner do not have this. A lot of times there are train stations that are far outside of town. And so we have an advantage here of taking advantage of all the active transportation options of getting to downtown, either by bike or walking or taking the bus. I should mention that this route is along Route 5, which goes right to the Amtrak station, and will provide a direct connection to downtown and to Cal Poly. The Pacific Surfliner is a very popular route for folks coming to San Luis Obispo, not only for tourism, but also for folks who live here, want to go elsewhere. A lot of students use it, but also we find a lot of seniors use this route as well too. For those who either choose not to drive or are not able to drive to get places. In your staff report, it mentions that the Pacific Surfliner is the second busiest intercity rail passenger corridor in the US, and this helps to alleviate congestion along US 101, folks getting to and from San Luis Obispo. Thank you, Brian.
All right, thank you, Adam. Just to sort of close out the staff presentation here, the next steps on this, the notice of preparation or the comment period for that closes on March 26th. Following the meeting, staff will work with LoSAN to identify comments that should be evaluated in the EIR. I think we can expect we'll get sort of comments that are clearly things that should be studied in the EIR, and then just other good comments that should be considered in the overall project design. And I certainly, based on what we've seen so far, would expect LoSAN is pretty receptive to working with us on that. But I do have to reiterate the actual purpose of the meeting is to provide comments on the EIR. Nevertheless, we'll work with all the comments we have and do the best we can with that. The next steps, once the draft EIR comes out, city staff will take that on. Typically, we would expect a 45-day public comment period. Staff will thoroughly evaluate that document and provide comments on the city's behalf. And that'll be regarding the overall adequacy of the EIR, feasibility of mitigation measures, alternatives analysis, pretty much all the content in the document. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the city does not have discretionary zoning authority over this project. Final project approval will be considered by the LoSAN Rail Corridor Agency. And that's all I have for the staff presentation. We could take some questions or go ahead and hear from James Campbell with the LoSAN Rail Corridor Agency.
So, commissioners, would you have some questions right now for staff, or would you prefer that we go on, get presentation from LoSAN, and then ask across the board? If you have any questions for staff, could you raise your hands and unmute yourselves and go ahead.
Chair Dandekar, I think I'd be in favor of just seeing the last presentation, and then perhaps questions will be answered, and then we can do questions after that.
Sounds good. Commissioner Wilkin, you are unmuted. Did you need to ask anything before we move on?
I agree. Let's go ahead and hear from the rail agency, and then take questions for staff and for the rail agency.
Thank you. If we could have, I believe it's Mr. Campbell who's going to present to us.
Yes. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Let me share my screen here really quickly. All right. Good evening again. As was already stated, my name is James Campbell. I'm the manager of operating and capital programs for the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency. We are the agency that manages and administers the Pacific Surfliner service. And I'm here today to present to you on the Central Coast Layover Facility Project Environmental Impact Report. I think a lot of what we were intending to present were already covered by both Brian and Adam there. But I want to briefly go through, as part of my presentation, some introductions, not only myself, but some of the others that are available for questions afterwards. Again, reiterate the purpose of this scoping meeting and what the environmental review process is that we're going through. A little bit more specifics on the project overview than what was given by Brian there. And again, just reiterating for those that have comments and or concerns of how they can go about presenting those public comments to us. So in the way of introductions, I've introduced myself, but also on the phone is Dan Fu. He is our environmental program manager representing the Lausanne agency. He's actually based with our managing agency or host agency of the Orange County Transportation Authority. And also with us is our design and environmental consultants from HDR, Scott Galstra and Tim Ganibas. So as was mentioned before, the primary purpose of this meeting and why we're here today is to provide the public and yourself and other governmental agencies with general information about this proposed project, and to provide an opportunity for the public to weigh in on the project and give comments that will help advise the designs and the overall environmental technical studies that we will be getting into that will make up the environmental impact report. So the environmental review process for this project will follow the process that's laid out as part of the California Environmental Quality Act. So that begins with obviously the decision to prepare an environmental impact report and to distribute a notice of preparation, which initiates this public scoping meeting of 30 days or public comment period, which includes the scoping meeting, which is what we're in right now. The comments we receive, as I mentioned, will advise the preparation of the draft environmental impact report. And as was mentioned by Brian earlier, once that is complete, it will be released for public review for a period of 45 days. We do anticipate that to be sometime this summer that will be released. Once that 45 days has concluded, we will prepare responses to those comments that we have received as part of the draft EIR and incorporate those into the final EIR that will then be taken to the Lausanne Board of Directors this fall for final approval. Brian also gave a little bit of a regional context, so I won't talk about this too much, but as he did mention, this is the northern portion of the Surfliner corridor on what's known as the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo, or shortened Lausanne Rail Corridor. It is a 351-mile corridor that extends from San Luis Obispo down to San Diego, serving stations in Santa Barbara, Ventura, Los Angeles, and Orange counties. It not only hosts the Pacific Surfliner, as was mentioned, as the second busiest intercity corridor in the United States. It's also the busiest state-supported corridor in the country, and also serves Union Pacific and BNSF Railway freight services and Metrolink and Coaster commuter services on the southern segment there. I'll just briefly go over and reiterate the project site location, which is exclusively within the city of San Luis Obispo city limits, located just south of the existing Amtrak station and the current layover facility, which currently only has the capacity to store and service one train set right now. The project is also generally within existing railroad property. This slide, which you've seen previously in the earlier presentations, does present the current site plan configuration for the facility at full build-out. It is important to note that this project will not be constructed all at once. It will be constructed in phases that are consistent with the overall passenger rail service growth needs for the corridor and region. Generally, how this would work, however, is trains each morning would actually, after performing their daily inspections and testing, would actually depart, head up to the station to the north here, board passengers, and then depart at their scheduled time south toward Los Angeles and San Diego. At the end of each day, the trains would do just the opposite. But as they come in, they would actually pass through a wash rack or a wash facility there to clean the train for that day before moving into its designated storage track. And once in that storage track, each train set would be connected to ground power so that the locomotive could be shut down, but the train still powered on electrical power provided locally there. This is done for, across Amtrak system now, including on the Losan corridor and even in the current facility there in San Luis Obispo. And that is to mitigate noise and pollution concerns for the communities that the service operates in. At that time, it just usually goes through a servicing routine of just cleaning, inspection to make sure everything's working right before it actually sets out the following day. And any repairs are made if needed. At full build out, the proposed project, as mentioned, will have a number of storage and servicing tracks. There will also be a number of support buildings, and these would be supportive of operations and fleet maintenance. There will be parts storeroom for spare parts for the train, maintenance of way, wash and cleaning facilities, and as Brian also mentioned, a wheel truing machine, which helps keep the wheel profile in a safe manner, so that way it hugs the rail appropriately. This is an important function in any rail facility across the country there. There will also be parking for those employees and visitors to the facility. It will be a secure site. It will have 24-hour security there, as well as a fenced off area. And as was mentioned previously, we've been working with the city as part of this process, and we'll be identifying fencing that will be consistent and compatible with the surrounding area and design standards for the city there. I also mentioned that it would be a phased project. For both the full build out and initial phase of the project, we are looking to establish a roundhouse protected zone. We realize the importance of the railroad historical heritage of this area. We want to recognize that to the extent we can with this facility and really preserve what we are able to of the old Southern Pacific Roundhouse. There's over 100 years of railroad history here that we want to make sure is documented and preserved to the extent we can as part of this project going forward. These pictures show a little bit of what we identified in some of our site observations there of some of the old roundhouse wall foundations, as well as most people can see out there, the kind of layout and base of the old roundhouse stalls. In addition, as was mentioned, we feel that there's other benefits to the community as part of this, providing both public as well as railroad access. The public access coming from the landscape buffer that we're looking at adding to the west that will incorporate the Class 1 bike trail or railroad safety trail, as Adam mentioned there. This is an important component that will be part of also the initial phase of the project. We'll also be looking at improving, as necessary, the east landscape buffer on the east side, because we realize this is a new facility in this location. We want to be sensitive to the residents on the other side of the railroad right-of-way, where the existing bike rail is too. So we'll be looking at what additional vegetation or landscape buffers we can incorporate on that side as well as part of this project. We have received several comments regarding the project already, and these comments should be addressed as part of these environmental technical studies that you see here. This is what we are looking at doing technical studies that will feed into the environmental impact report. To name a few, we're looking at air quality, historic resources, noise and vibration, and similar technical studies there that will all look to address a lot of these comments that we are receiving. As mentioned previously, we are currently in the public comment period of the project. So we're encouraging everyone, if you have a comment or concern that you would like to share, please email to the address that is actually provided on the slide here. It's provided on our website as well, which is losan.org. It's provided in the notice of preparation also. It's capitalprojects@losan.org. And please include in the subject line Central Coast Layer Facility, or CCLF for short. Or you can provide written comments to myself, the manager of programs for the Losan Rail Corridor Agency, at 600 South Main Street in the city of Orange, California. As Brian also mentioned, this comment period is open until March 26th. So if you do have a comment or concern, please be sure to get that sent in to us before the deadline so we can be sure to incorporate that into the environmental impact report. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Did you have any further consultants or anybody who needed to speak before the commission?
My consultants and support staff actually are here to, if there's any questions that come up from a technical nature, they're here to help with answering that. But I was the one to do the presentation.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, questions of staff. I'll call upon you alphabetically to make sure we hear from everybody. Commissioner Hopkins.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair Dendekar. I think my first question for staff would be just to maybe reiterate, and I apologize if this was covered. I dropped off of my internet for a second, had to get a hotspot back up. But can you talk a little bit more about the transit connections that were currently planned and how this project will be impacting those, and our ability to, if there is a significant impact, our ability to ensure that those are mitigated within the EIR?
I can handle that one. So all I know about is the connection to the Transit Route 5, which is there, which has a bus stop at the Amtrak station. I'm not aware of any transit impacts at this time. I don't, just because Route 5 does not go over the railroad tracks. So I'm not aware of any at this time, but that's something we can look into as we get further into the process.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question for the applicant too. Are we going all through staff and then all for applicant questions, or how did you?
Let's do both right now.
Do both, okay. And then for the applicant, you mentioned phasing of the project. I was just wondering if you could go a little bit into which components of the project will be a higher priority versus a lower priority for you at this point.
Yeah, sure. Let me go back to one of the graphic here. The initial phase of the project is going to be focusing on, and I believe Brian had mentioned this earlier, is going to be focused on our ability to support a second Surfliner train set overnight. So we are looking at two base tracks there adjacent to the facility to allow for servicing. Included with that is going to be the ability to connect to ground power, water, air, so we can fully disconnect the functions of the locomotive overnight there. Another part of phase one that we realize is important going forward is going to be the landscape buffers there and the associated improvements along the landscape buffer, both on the east and the west side there. There will obviously need to be some level of support facilities and buildings, but probably not to the extent of the full build, as well as paving and access roads and some level of parking. We are actually still determining the overall extent of the initial phase, so that actually might change a little bit as we get through the process there. But those are some of the major components that we'd be looking at as part of the initial phase of the project. And well, before I turn it back, I was going to ask if Scott or Tim had anything else to add to that as far as from our design environmental consultants.
No, James, nothing to add. I think you just covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell, is it possible for you to point, are you controlling the screen? So can you point out where these things go when you talk about them?
I apologize. Yes, I will be sure to do that. Can everyone see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hopkins, did you have any other questions? Commissioner Hopkins?
That concludes my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Khan?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Quincy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Hopkins hit on something that that I had a question about, and I don't think he got an answer on it. It was ensuring mitigation. I'm a little concerned that the city appears to be somewhat powerless when it comes to this project. And so I had concerns about mitigation. Clearly noise is going to be a big issue, potentially even emissions. So I was just curious if someone from the city can answer how they are planning on ensuring that's taken care of.
Brian, that may be more for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to, okay. Yeah, Commissioner Quincy, I think that starting from the EIR perspective, certainly the LoSAN's preparing an EIR per the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act. So certainly city staff will conduct a thorough review to see the impact analysis, the methodology, the mitigation measures that may be recommended for feasibility. And staff will essentially take a look and try to make sure that the analysis is correct and the evaluation has been done thoroughly enough to identify impacts and then propose mitigation measures if needed that are actually feasible and that reduce impacts to the greatest degree possible, or if feasible, completely reduce impacts to less than significant levels. As far as the city's review authority over the project, there is, outside of the EIR perspective, still some continuing discussions, and I think that there's a lot of complexity involved from a legal standpoint about exactly what the city's ability is to, I guess, comment or from a health and safety perspective to place requirements on this project. So that's to a certain extent an ongoing issue that needs to be looked at, but it's something that the city is very serious about, making sure that the city's interests to the greatest degree possible are considered as this project moves forward.
Thank you for that. That was kind of my biggest concern. I know we're pretty early on in the process, but I was hoping to maybe just plant that seed pretty early, and was hopeful that the city would kind of think through that in the event that some of those measures need to go into place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Shorsman, do you have questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Dandekar. I'm just going to back up just for a second, just to make sure that I'm clear about what the purpose is of this scoping session. So the EIR has not been created yet. The purpose of this meeting is to sort of help define what elements the EIR should look at. Is that correct? Based on what I saw on the last slide was sort of the list of issues that might be related to this: air quality, noise. We're just looking for things that should be addressed in the EIR, correct?
Yes, that is correct, Commissioner.
Okay. So with that, I didn't see safety, and I guess that's sort of a general term on the list. But I did see references in the staff report to fencing. And so I'm curious what is proposed. Where would the fencing be that is proposed, since there is some, I guess I'm confused about that, since there is some shared use path that's going to be going in, and where would the fencing be in relation to the existing bike path on the other side of the current tracks, and in comparison to where the proposed new bike paths are?
Well, I'll take a start at answering that generally, and then turn it over to our design environmental consultant to add any elaboration there. But currently, the specific location is still being worked out, but just because we are still very much at the beginning here as part of this process. But the fencing itself will be focused on the railroad portion of the facility. So the fencing would not impede anyone's ability to access the bikeways or the railroad safety trails and the green spaces on either the west or east side. It's to protect the facility and the railroad functions themselves. The specific locations are yet to be determined because, as we mentioned, or as I mentioned, as part of the railroad protected zone that we're trying to establish there, we want the public still to be able to have access and view the historic nature of the old roundhouse structure there. So how much of that can we include in the fenced off area versus not? All of this is still kind of being discussed and worked through of what is possible going forward. But with that, Scott, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to elaborate on there.
Just to say that, yeah, generally there would be a continuous path along the west side of the site where you can see all the green on the image there. So that would be where we would try and route pedestrians away from the mechanical features of the facility, so that we can keep those uses separated.
So the buildings and the roadway and the roundhouse area and the parking would all theoretically be outside of the fencing? Am I kind of guessing at that correctly?
No, those facilities would be inside the fence, and then there'd be a fence and the landscaping to the west of those features.
Generally speaking, this blue line is kind of a concept that is, could be where the fence generally would be, but it's in this area of the roundhouse, location that we're still trying to determine the best location, so to speak, as part of it. But the parking here would be associated with the functions of the facility itself. So those would be inside the security fence. The buildings would be for railroad operations, maintenance facilities, parts storage. So those would be part of the secured area as well. So largely anything green that you are seeing here is assumed to be outside of the security fence.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, okay, that answers my question. Thank you. That's all.
Chair Dandekar, I think you're muted.
Yeah. I was actually calling on Commissioner Jorgensen to see if he had any questions.
Sure. Maybe I wanted to stand back just a little bit just to be sure I'm understanding. And my interest in this is the likelihood of actually getting those pedestrian and bike bridges built over, well, in my lifetime, let's say. And so if I could ask Mr. Campbell, is Lawson the property owner for this site? You're certainly the applicant. I understand that.
We are not the property owner. Union Pacific Railroad is the property owner right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they haven't been mentioned in this at all, other than Union Pacific and Amtrak are obviously involved in some way.
They are. Union Pacific has been engaged from the beginning. They are supportive of this process. In fact, we do have an agreement going to our board of directors on Monday with Union Pacific specific to this project and their support in moving through the design process here.
So they can see some ways they gain from this, I take it then.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. I guess what's on my mind is that whether you can say anything about the likelihood that there will be sufficient room for landings and enough runway for bridges such that they can meet Union Pacific height limits, the kind of height that'll be required over trains for a bridge to ever be approved by them. And you're optimistic that that's something that can be, that sufficient room for design of both of those bridges is a feasible part of this?
I can't speak for Union Pacific. I can only speak to us, but
that part I understand.
Yeah. As much as I would like to, I can say that through the preliminary engineering design process here and working with the city to the best that we can, and with the broken crystal ball that we have and that we all have here, and we can't see into the future, is to try and preserve as best we can the ability for those pedestrian bridges to be constructed in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's all.
Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions for staff. First of all, on the process, I did not see in the different steps in the process a step where the draft environmental impact report returns to the Planning Commission for a hearing. I was wondering if that is planned, or if that's something that the Planning Commission should suggest if we're interested in that. I certainly would be in favor of seeing this back once the EIR is prepared. So that's a question for staff.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that question just from the standpoint of it's certainly something that could be requested. As Brian mentioned, we're still, discussing what the city's role with respect to the EIR may be, to the extent that any permits may be required to be issued. There's a potential that we're a responsible agency and have a role to play in that sense. At this time, it doesn't look like that will be the case. And so if it's not the case that we would have any permits to issue in support of the project, then it would be a courtesy review that they would provide to us. So when a draft EIR is published, it will have a public review period. And at that point in time, we could request a presentation, or staff could simply provide the Planning Commission with a presentation on the draft EIR in order for comments to be made by the Planning Commission and then sent in formally as part of the EIR review process. But tonight is not a required hearing. It's being provided by Lausanne upon request. And the relationship has been very positive, and it's been two-way communication the whole time. And so I expect that to continue. And to the extent that the Planning Commission is interested in having a presentation and hearing about the results of the draft EIR, I'm pretty confident that that can be accommodated.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring that up again when the Planning Commission makes its comments. One more question. I believe in Mr. Fukushima's presentation, he made the point that the city was asking that the project design be compatible with the future crossing over the tracks from Roundhouse to Bishop. But when I was looking at the circulation element, I noticed that there's still a plan in there, or a proposal for a vehicular connection as well between Bishop and Roundhouse. And so my question is, would this, the design of this project preclude that? With those tracks, with the new tracks now very close to where the terminus of Roundhouse, would a vehicular connection and bridge be precluded by the project? So maybe that's a question for Mr. Campbell or for Mr. Fukushima or staff. I'm not sure who.
Well, I can just highlight that there was one graphic that showed the two yellow arrows with the connection, and maybe Scott, if it's possible to bring that one back up, or maybe that was part of Brian's or James, but maybe that was part of Brian's presentation.
Yeah, that was part of Brian's presentation.
Okay. So, if I could just highlight that there's two different types of crossings here. The one at Francis, it's actually, I think, planned to be a little bit further down, is a connection to Sinsheimer Park, and that's a ped bike bridge in the plan. The connection that's in the circulation element, that's the Bishop Roundhouse connection, is in the circulation element as a street connection, and it's in our transportation impact fee program, and it's as well as the ped bridge. So these are things that we are actively planning for in the future, but that no design has begun in terms of thinking through the how such a facility would actually be delivered. At one point in my career with the city, that Bishop Roundhouse connection was an underpass. So the circulation element identifies the need for a connection there, but it's a pretty high level plan at this point, and I'm sure Adam can provide some more information to the extent there is any.
Michael, I think you've addressed it pretty well, pretty much how I would have addressed it as well too. So it's a pretty high level concept for the crossing at this point.
Okay, well, thank you. I was wondering if Mr. Campbell had any thoughts about whether that would even be a possibility or feasible if the project goes in.
I couldn't. I honestly couldn't say it at this point. I mean, again, as I mentioned before, at least for the pedestrian and bike bridge, we were talking about working with the city to see to the best we could, preserving the ability to provide a bridge across there. It would have to be a similar thing, I would imagine, as we went through the process to see whether it be an underpass or an overpass for the highway connection there. And what that might look like and require, and how that might or may affect the track positioning as part of that. But I couldn't speak to that specifically from our end.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess I'll comment on that later when we talk about things to include in the EIR. So those are all my comments from now.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkin. I had one question, and I think it's probably for Mr. Campbell. I was really finding it hard to understand the plan we have before us and where the various facilities go, and we got a very small print also. So I'd appreciate just understanding where these various facilities are located, Mr. Campbell, and also some sense of the kind of height and massing of these structures. They seem to be all arrayed along the west boundary. Could you speak to what they will do aesthetically, how high they'll be, given that the site itself is substantially higher than the surrounding ground and surrounding buildings? What are we looking at here?
Well, some of the specifics that you're requesting, we will actually be defined and worked through as part of the technical work that we're entering into as part of the EIR and the preliminary engineering, specifically of what the architecture may look like and what they look like. We haven't decided on that yet, but it will undoubtedly be involve city input there to make sure it's consistent again with the roundhouse or the railroad district in the area. You are correct, it is a tiered location where this area is higher than the businesses and residences just to the west, and then there's another tier on the other side, on the east side, where it's actually higher than the facility itself. The actual height will be determined by the equipment. We, on the Surfliner, do use bi-level intercity equipment, same as the Amtrak Coast Starlight does. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think the cars themselves are 16 feet high. So it would be something that would allow for at least the servicing shed and over the inspection pit would be high enough to allow for the bi-level cars to enter underneath it. The building heights will be determined on the square footage and whether or not we can do single or need two-story buildings. So that has not yet been defined. It has been discussed through various options. And the reason why they're also all on the west side is that's where the vehicular access is for those facilities. So it's a lot easier to get, an employee's car in and out or a servicing truck in and out of that area from the west as part of that. Scott or Tim, did you want to add anything more on this? I don't think there's much more to go, but with the information we have so far, but feel free to chime in any additional information.
I think you covered it, James. Thanks.
All right.
The colored buildings on the, could you just tell us what all those buildings are? The yellow, the amber. Yeah,
they're color coded. I don't remember exactly what each color represents, but it represents what this slide is showing. So one color and building is operations and fleet maintenance. That's where you would have the positions like, the road foreman or the yard master who's in charge of the facility there. You would have briefing rooms for the crews to come in and get their orders and assignments for the day, as far as where the issues are along the tracks before they take the train out. One of them is a parts storeroom just with spare parts that people could go in. They would check out the parts to replace broken ones on the trains there. There would be, cleaning shelters, maintenance offices. So that's kind of what each color represents, kind of a different bullet point that's represented on this slide as far as the buildings.
So are these buildings well insulated for sound? What's the need? So that's one question. And what's the nature of the landscaping or buffer area that you're thinking about? Because, we're hearing some concern from the neighborhoods about noise, about lack of blocking of views, all of those things which you can understand neighbors might have.
Yeah. Tim, did you want to take this question, please?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, commissioners and chair for your comments. this is exactly what we're looking for as part of the scoping meeting. We'd like to get your input on these issues. Let's see, I didn't have my camera on. Apologize for that. So, and a couple things that I had made notes of during your comments, and with respect to the building sizes and heights, that is still being worked out as part of the design. But once we have that, we fully intend to prepare an aesthetics and visual analysis as part of the environmental impact report. So there would be very good illustrations of what these facilities will look like. We have to factor in not only the building heights, but any topographical change that may be part of this project. So that concern will be addressed. And then with respect to noise, that also is being studied. We have a noise specialist that is preparing a preliminary study. And based on the results of that study, we're going to take a look at what mitigations we can do if we find that we have any significant noise levels as part of the operations. And so we're going to be recommending those to Lausanne. And they could be exactly what you mentioned, for example, insulation of buildings and such. So those are a couple that I had noted. I did want to go back. There was a question on the process. Lausanne doesn't particularly, well, they don't have a planning commission, so there isn't really a stop for a public workshop for the draft EIR per se. It will be available for public review, and of course we'll notice it and make sure that that the city is aware that it's available for review when the time comes. And I think we would need to just continue our discussions with the city and city staff as to if we can work in a workshop on the draft environmental impact report along with the planning commission. So we'll certainly consider that as well. Those are kind of the main notes I have at the moment, and here for more questions.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I was just wanting to make sure that Lausanne was aware that this area falls into a historic railroad district designation, and having served on the historic commission for several years, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the record that the city has been very diligent in trying to maintain, even in the contemporary buildings that go into this area. You'll note the commercial retail facility just south of the parking lot is sort of typified as railroad vernacular design. And this is going to be, San Luis prides itself on sort of the aesthetic nature of the cityscape, and this area, this is going to be a substantial intervention in this area around the railroad, and so I'd appreciate it being noted that the contemporary buildings, even though these are basically industrial maintenance and other kinds of buildings, that I think the city would really appreciate if the sense of railroad vernacular architecture was incorporated in the proposals that are made for the new construction.
Yeah, no, it's we are definitely we definitely recognize, Commissioner, that's the historic nature of the region. That's why we want to be very sensitive to not only the preservation, but how it integrates into the overall district. We have received copies of the Railroad District Plan. We've reviewed it. We want to make sure that we can be as complimentary as possible with how it is integrated into that particular region. It's just kind of the next step in the railroad history of the city there.
It's unfortunate that that plan is a bit dated now. It was an idea in good currency when it was made, but it's a bit dated now. But I think we do have some modern structures that have come up that have tried to emulate the sort of contemporary take on railroad vernacular. And we've been asking for that. So I think it would be very helpful. I very much appreciated the sort of green belt in a way that you're creating on the west side of the property. And I think the precise sort of nature of that would be important in this screening and aesthetic transition to these larger structures that are going to be on this podium elevated plane, so that even if views are blocked, they're blocked by buildings that speak to the nature of the city.
And or the vegetation and landscaping. So it's something it's nice, because we recognize that it's going to be a change, that we're building a rail facility, so there's going to be noise, but how do you mitigate that without changing the aesthetic nature of the area and really impacting the residents there? So that was the very purpose. We knew going in from the beginning that even though we're still working out the details here and what it will actually look like and how it will be designed, from the very beginning, it was always known that there would be a landscape buffer on the west side there that can be incorporated into the city's plans there as part of that. So that's been there from the very beginning.
Thank you. I think we're ready. Thank you for your answers. I think we're ready for public comments. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we have a number of people who have asked to speak. Let me just take over the screen for a moment so that we can show people how. All right. So I'm going to read off the names that I have right now so that you know what order you're in, and then I'll call on the first person to speak. Elizabeth Allo, Jackie Mansour, Daniel Kalel, Pete Rogers, Jonathan Arman. Those are the people who have their hands raised now. So the process here for tonight is that I'm going to promote the speaker to a presenter so that they can show their video. And then once they're able to show their video, then we'll go ahead and start their timer for their 3 minutes. When they're done, I will have to demote them and promote the next person forward. So Jackie Mansour, you should. I'm promoting you to panelists now. Excellent.
Hi, my name is.
Are you able to turn your video on?
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Mansour, and I work for the SLO Air Pollution Control District. The APCD's main concerns with this project are the impacts of diesel particulate matter on nearby residents due to diesel idling. Diesel particulate matter has been classified by the California Air Resources Board as a toxic air contaminant and a carcinogen. We have received complaints about the train idling in the depot area, as well as further south near the Tank Farm Arbors area. So understanding the policies related to idling will be important. Engines have idled between 4 hours to overnight and even to full days based upon complaints we have received in the past. So it's important to know how idling will be managed. The APCD has received hundreds of complaints regarding trade idling in the last 20 years. So this potentially could be a significant issue. Any running of the diesel engines for maintenance or cleaning may expose nearby residents to diesel particulate. Additionally, clarity on expected welding operations will be needed to understand the level of toxic impacts. The polluting sources of this project should be oriented as far back as possible from residents. The APCD will be submitting a response letter to the NOP by the March 26th deadline, expanding on these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker then is Elizabeth Allo. If you can turn on your video, please.
I am not sure how to turn on video. Here we go. There we are. Hi, I'm a resident at the Roundhouse Place Apartments. I've got a few concerns. First of all, how long is the phases of the project going to last with construction? We literally are about 10 yards from this project, even including the bicycle path that you plan to have. My biggest concerns are noise throughout the construction process, and then after, listening to the trains idle is very loud in the area. And then also the crime. We do get a lot of crime in this area from having that roundhouse portion open. I'm concerned about traffic. We already have a lot of traffic coming in and out, especially with the retail area, with the dollar store, the Dollar Tree. There will be no way to widen Roundhouse because of the fire station and the stalwart business. We're already limited on parking. So if they take away parking on that street, we will have a big problem. And then you won't be able to turn left on Broad. This is if it goes into an over like a thoroughfare, because it will take a lot of the traffic from Johnson Street, I believe, over to Broad Street. And then the lighting. I'm very concerned about the lighting in the yard and how that's going to impact the residential apartments in the area. Since we are super close to it, they will be a lot higher than us. So it will probably shine down on the apartment complexes a lot. And there's a couple more apartment complexes that weren't included on this map that have been I can't think of the word, that have gone up and have been rented out in the past probably year or so. And there's a couple more that are being built right now that are going to be impacted as well. So those are my biggest concerns. Again, it's mostly going to be about the construction time. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Dan Kalal. I'm promoting him now.
All right, I'm here. Thank you. I think I had a big list of questions and comments, and I think everybody has done a great job of addressing a lot of the comments and questions that I had. But I do want to kind of make sure that, kind of piggybacking on one of the Ms. Dandikar's comments about the railroad safety, not about the railroad district, though this project is in fact in the railroad district, the adjacent properties, the apartment buildings that are existing now and stuff like that, they're actually in the Broad Street area corridor plan, and which has its aesthetic concerns as well. So, and they piggyback quite a bit with the railroad safety, with the railroad district, stuff like that. So aesthetics are a big part of this part of town. And I just wanted to make sure that that's understood, that there are two highly detailed adjacent plans, and looking at both of them at the same time might help get this project through in a way that's satisfactory. And then also just piggybacking again on just the idea of safety. A huge bike advocate, part of about the Broad Street corridor plan, helping get that through. And the big part of that was making sure we have connectivity and transportation. I was a little scared at first. I interpreted your plan as the bike path was between the yard and the railroad state or the existing railroad path. I'm glad that's not the extent of it. I think having that railroad safety trail on the west side between your facility and between the existing residents is going to really bump up the safety of the travel there, because there's high visibility, because that area gets real dark and real lonely really quick. And so any improvements that go through here with pedestrians and bicycles, safety really needs to be a factor. And I really appreciate that it's even in the plan right now. So with that, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you much.
The next speaker will be Pete Rogers.
You're muted, Pete. Sorry to interrupt, but we can't hear you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for that. I'm Pete Rogers. I'm Executive Director of the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments. And in fact, San Luis Obispo Council of Governments is one of the member agencies of LoSAN. So you essentially are a member of LoSAN, the city of San Luis Obispo is. And I just want to put a little bit broader lens on this and underscore our strong support for this project. I mean, obviously, a lot of the project already you've seen, there's been a lot of respect for the past, and this county has a lot of rail in its past. And it's true that there's a lot of rail in our future. And we're actually lucky to have 6 of our 7 cities in this county along the rail line. And this facility is going to provide the operational flexibility that we need to go forward in the future. It's going to provide a viable and functional endpoint to grow LoSAN services, and in the future have services north of San Luis Obispo. The state plans envision San Luis Obispo as an endpoint station, and the state rail plan is trying to get the entire state on a pulsing network of regular services every 4 to 2 hours. You know, you can go to the train station and catch a bus or a train going north or south. Now, for further information on some of the statewide growth, you can go to the SLOCOG agenda in our April meeting. We'll be looking at the Central Coast role in that statewide connectivity. And in June, SLOCOG will be looking at the possibilities that we have for any commuter rail development. Rail growth is very consistent with what's going on with climate change and with the California Action Plan for transportation investments. And so, you know, we look forward to supporting this project and future rail projects along the corridor. So thank you very much for your time.
The next speaker will be Jonathan. Jonathan, I am promoting you now. Could you state your last name when you are able to turn on your mic and video?
Hello?
Perfect, we see you.
Great. Hi, my name is Jonathan Roberts, and I'm the current chair of the city's Active Transportation Committee. Although tonight I am speaking to you as a resident of the community. I would like to point out that motorized transportation in San Luis Obispo is the #1 contributor to our city's greenhouse gas emissions. I am concerned about the negative effects that having more trains, more service vehicles, and their cumulative effect on our city's climate action goals. If not mitigated proportionally, the impact from this project will negatively affect our climate action goals. I suggest that the pedestrian improvements within the site's area aren't nearly enough to balance out that equation. As it stands, the unfinished railroad safety trail between Orchid and Cal Poly services a large number of people daily. This number would go up significantly if the railroad would grant the necessary easements for the completion of the unfinished sections. The individual car trips that would be avoided by finishing the railroad safety trail would go a long ways towards mitigating the additional greenhouse gases this project will subject on our community. Thank you.
The next speaker is Armin. I'm promoting you now. Please state your last name when you're able to turn on your mic and your video.
Is that a video or Zoom?
It's a Zoom meeting it's on right now.
Are you able to see me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I'll continue that. I have a question for the agency as well as the city. There were 2 fires that occurred on the property, one in May 2017 and December 2018. Are you aware of fires? Was there any investigation that revealed these fires? The fire were basically set to ties. One of the fires was actually on the property itself where Roundhouse is. This is basically our backyard. If you get one of the cross sections that Mr. Campbell had showed, showed the section C is a parking lot. However, there's a building next to it, which is a few feet away where the fire was. The question is, what has he done or doesn't happen again? The property be off or stable, like the trains is. I have a Cali and a Fed complaint. I don't know if the agent had heard anything from those agents. The photo shown in the very beginning, you can dispose of that you see on the side. It's still there. Granted, the roads aren't there. It just seems like currently being the disposals for the agent itself. I kind of want to hear about, and maybe it does. So on that, I'm actually looking to the events on these, so it doesn't. Next, height. Is it safe to assume the height of Gen Bridge will be about where the will be, because where the actually cross? And in addition, what will happen to the now available that's at the train where the service currently? And finally, what's the point of contact for sand? I understand this doesn't have any over the site, so any complaint, do we forward to the city? Do we go to Mr. Campbell or go to public information center at low? I think that's it.
Kevin, if I could just want to make sure that Armin knows that the connection there was not great, and so we weren't able to pick up every word of the public testimony there. We will be providing contact information next time we at the close of public comments. So I would encourage you to provide your testimony via email to James Campbell or to others. We can forward that if you send it to city staff, but we'll get you that contact information. Just want to make sure your comments are entered into the record, because the quality of of the audio is not great there.
Thanks, Michael. The next speaker is Glenn Matson. I'm going to promote you to panelist now. Glenn, he has requested that we show an image that he provided as public comment. I will change that.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, you're on, Glenn. If you're able to share your screen to show yourself, that would be great.
I don't see a way to turn on. Oh, there it is. Every time I use Zoom, it's a little different. Can you see me now? There we go. Okay, well, looking at me is not important. Looking at the image is more important. Glenn Madison, San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum, 1940 Santa Barbara Avenue. You have a letter from us, so I won't go into detail or take very much time. We appreciate the information that has been provided by the LoSAN staff and the HDR staff, so we could get kind of an early preview of what was proposed. This is looking along the existing main tracks. It was taken by a drone, so nobody was trespassing to take these photos. It shows the museum building in the distance there. In the foreground, we have the Plymouth switching locomotive that was used to cramp Roberts during World War II, Southern Pacific Bay window caboose, former cafe lounge observation car from the steam era, and so on down towards the building. Obviously, LoSAN wants their site to be secure. The preliminary plan isn't real clear on where the fencing would be beyond the actual site. It kind of implies that it might extend along the easterly side, in other words, the side that we see here of the Union Pacific property, which is basically right along the side of our rolling stock. So if it were to be developed that way, we would lose effective access to maintain those items. In this particular view, the three items have been moved south from where they usually are. Usually this part of the track is wide open, but depending on how far that fencing would extend, that issue would be applicable wherever the fence is. We need this area for access from the west because our display track does not connect to the active Union Pacific tracks. So everything we bring in has to be by truck and crane. Somewhat less of an issue is the proposed multi-use path that would be west of the layover facility at the end of Emily Street. The museum actually occupies city-owned property in this view you see, and also the unimproved portion of the north end of Emily Street with prior city approval. If the grading and retaining walls that might be needed for the multi-use path at the far north end of Emily Street to connect with High Street aren't properly designed, it would prevent our access to Emily Street at the north end. We'd still have access from the south end, but it's been a great advantage to us and sometimes the city utilities department and the gas company to also be able to get access from the north end. That concludes my comments. I would just like to note, however, that you know, the proposed project would reestablish a small fraction of the activity that occurred on that site not that many years ago. Into the 1980s, there was locomotive maintenance and all sorts of things happening there. So it looks like my time is up. Thank you for your time.
Chair Dandekar, Deputy City Clerk Christian, that was the last comment that we had from public on this item.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring the meeting back to the commission for our deliberations. Commissioners, the floor is open to discuss. There is no motion on this item. We're in a position of informing and describing some of the issues. So I was wondering whether it would be useful to put on the screen the elements that go into an EIR, and if we could address our comments to specific headings. How would that work? Would that be helpful in our deliberations?
Chairwoman Dandekar, if I could, I wanted to ask for staff to take over the presentation so that we could at least project the contact information for members of the public. Now, since public comments now closed, if any members of the public want to follow up with additional comments, I'd like to have that contact information up. So Brian, I don't know if you have a slide there that provides for that. And can put that up.
Sure, I can do that.
That would be great. And then just want to clarify again for the commission that this really isn't a matter of deliberation. It's just a matter of scoping. So if commissioners have additional items that haven't been covered that they want to make sure are addressed in the scope of the environmental impact report, then you can use this time to provide that additional input. But otherwise, there's no action required from the commission, further.
Michael, does staff feel that they have adequate depth for what's been addressed so far, or any clarifications needed?
Let's see. I'll just see if Tyler or Brian have anything additional. I feel like we've gone pretty deep into the issues. I thought it was good to hear from members of the public about the concerns. I think staff will be providing its own comments that cover pretty much the full range of issues that we would normally expect to see in an environmental impact report, just to make sure that nothing gets missed. It is going to be a full environmental impact report. They haven't screened out any issues for discussion, and so I think that staff feels pretty confident at this point, but just want to make sure if planning commissioners want to add anything, now's the time to do it, but no actions required.
Now, I would just add on to that this recording, we're going to provide this to the LoSAN staff, the applicants. So they're going to, and they've asked for that ahead of time and wanted to know how to get it. So we will be providing them, this video so they can kind of comb through all the comments, both from the commission and from the public. And they'll have that in detail. So that should be covered.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So commissioners, do you have any comments to add that you feel you didn't adequately cover during the so I see Commissioner Shorsman's hand up.
Thank you, Chair Dandekar. I think, I would just like to say that I am impressed by the breadth of comments that we got from the public on this project. There was a lot of really valid concerns brought up, and I'm sure that many of them would already just naturally be discussed in an EIR, but things like time of day when the activities would be occurring on the tracks, noise, the amount of lighting at night, the chemicals and impacts of idling and welding at all times of the day, considerations of our ability to move forward with bike and pedestrian crossings, and having those bike facilities be safe. I think that is maybe safety is one thing that I didn't see in the list on the EIR list slide, but I did hear concerns about safety of the area in general, both the way it exists now and what would be done with the site to make it safer for all types of users. I think the one last comment that I would make about the roundhouse area and any fencing that goes around it, and I appreciate that both city staff and LoSAN staff are looking at ways to preserve that roundhouse area and provide some educational, facts or things about the site that could help enhance that location. But I guess the last thing that I would say about that is that if we do take the time and the energy to preserve that area, I hope it would be in the plans to make that area visible to passersby and people using the pedestrian and the bike and neighborhood walkways to actually view the area, and that whatever fencing that goes in there, both, hopefully we can find something that provides security and safety, but also visibility so that people can enjoy the history that's being preserved there. That's about all I'd like to say.
Did I see Commissioner Wilkins' hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Dandekar. I do have several comments. First of all, I'd like to echo Commissioner Shorsman's observation about the many public comments that were submitted. I read all the written comments that were submitted prior to our meeting, and I thought there were a lot of very thoughtful comments, and I'm hoping that the EIR considers those comments very carefully. First of all, regarding the project description, I think that the project description in the EIR needs to be a lot more detailed and specific compared to what we've seen so far in order to evaluate the project's potential environmental impacts. For example, I think the EIR needs to map the proposed location of all the buildings and all the fencing more precisely than what we've seen, which is kind of a concept, actually. I would also think that the design of all the buildings should be illustrated in the project description, and that there should be a more detailed description of exactly what activities are being proposed at the different buildings and elsewhere, and also the hours of operation should be specified for all the activities. And finally, the phasing plan that's been alluded to should be fairly detailed in the project description. Now, getting to some other issues, first of all, I agree with the comments that staff put up regarding the transportation, community development, and historic preservation. And along those lines, as far as general plan and ordinance consistency, I would recommend that the EIR evaluate consistency with the railroad historic area plan and with the historic preservation ordinance and guidelines as far as the roundhouse site goes. And then also, this is an issue I brought up before, I think the EIR should evaluate consistency with the circulation element as far as that proposed street connection between Bishop and Roundhouse, and whether the project will interfere with or preclude that connection as a possibility. It seems that if it did, that would be an impact, at least to land use and perhaps circulation. And then there were a lot of comments about the pedestrian bicycle access across the railroad. And along those lines, I think the EIR should evaluate whether the security fencing would cause a physical impact to the informal access that's occurring now. And if so, is there a mitigation measure, at least in the short term, before the city or another agency installs the proposed crossings over the railroad? Is there some alternative access that could be accomplished in the short term as a mitigation measure? And then my final request is actually for the commission, and that is that the commission request that the commission hold another meeting similar to this one once the draft EIR is out, just to submit our comments on the draft EIR and allow the public an opportunity to do so in a venue like this. So I guess that maybe that is a motion that the commission could take, or maybe just something that we could do by consensus and indicate that we agree we would like the city staff to arrange another meeting like this once the draft EIR is out. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Good, thank you. Those were a number of thoughtful comments from several commissioners, and to speak to the last proposal from Commissioner Wilkin, I would certainly support. I'd be glad to second a motion that staff arrange within that 45-day hearing period a chance for people to testify before the Planning Commission and for us to speak on it as part of that, as part of city staff also preparing their own comments. I think that's really useful. Also, another point he made, and actually I think Commissioner Shorsman did as well, the time of day is a very important aspect of this. I've certainly, I've taken the train to San Diego a dozen times at least, and it works very well, and often it's on time. But I can also remember times getting home well after midnight from a train that should have arrived around 5:30 or 6, and a tree was down on the tracks. There was a storm. There was this. There was that, and I would be really concerned that about full, loud maintenance activities starting very late at night. So the point really is the printed schedule isn't a sufficient basis for developing a maintenance plan, or it may be, but if that means that they don't do maintenance outside of those hours. But I think the train does arrive late. I do hear those horns very late at night, surprisingly often. So I'll stop right there.
So I'm hearing a second vote for coming back with comments for the draft EIR. And Commissioner Khan, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Quincy?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Commissioner Hopkins, I don't see you here.
Yeah, just I wanted to quickly echo Commissioner Shorsman, Wilkin, and Jorgensen's comments, I think, and just reemphasize a lot of the public comment we got. I thought was exceptional, especially as it relates to pedestrian and bicycle connections. And then just without, rehashing everything that was already said, just wanted to thank the applicant for being as responsive as they have been and working with the city as closely as they have, especially when their requirement to do so is a little bit more limited than it normally is. So I thank them for that. I hope that continues through the entirety of the EIR. And I also hope that listening is reflected in action and what the ultimate plan looks like. And so I just wanted to thank them and staff for continuing to work on this. And yeah, I'm supportive of this coming back also so we can see the draft EIR.
So I think so far we have 3 people. Do we have 4 people 3 people who said they'd like it to come back? Can we just have a straw poll on this? I heard from Commissioner Jorgensen, Wilkin, and Hopkins that they'd like to be involved at some level with the draft EIR. What about Commissioner Khan and
I would be in favor of that.
And Commissioner Shorsman?
I would be in favor of that as well.
Okay, and so would I. Think that Commissioner Quincy, sorry.
I'm supportive of it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So it sounds like we have consensus that we'd like to be involved in being able to look at and perhaps comment on the draft EIR as it comes in. If staff has enough on this item, I think we're ready to bring it to a close.
Yes, I think we have all the info. Sorry, Michael, I just saw you talking there. I think we have what we need, and we have it all on tape, so that's super helpful. And we will pass this information in terms of the taping along, and we have the contact info for any public comments that we should get at staff, and we'll pass that along as well to LoSAN. So really appreciate all the thoughtful comments and public input on this scoping meeting.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have 2 more items before us, so I suggest we take a 10-minute break because we have 2 items. Is that agreeable? Okay, it's 5 to 8, I believe. Why don't we reconvene at 8:05? See you in 10 minutes. It looks like we have all the commissioners back. Yes, we do. The next item for our consideration is to review a project located at 3806 Ranch House Road, as the slide indicates. If we could have, I would like to ask commissioners if anybody has had their ex parte disclosure of contact with anyone who has provided information to the planning commissioners that's not on the record, so that we can include this information as part of the decision-making process. Have there been any ex parte communications to the commission? Please unmute and declare if so.
Hello, Chair Dandekar. This is Commissioner Hopkins.
Yes.
I haven't had any ex parte communication, but I wanted to communicate that I will be recusing myself from this item as my employer is contracted to fulfill the remainder of the developer's inclusionary housing obligation. Thank you. See you all on the side on item 4.
Thank you. We'll see you for item 4. Would Associate Planner Kyle Bell please present the report?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think I can. Oh, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
Not yet.
There we go. That should work.
Yep. We see it now, Kyle.
Okay, great. All right. So good evening. Tonight we will be reviewing a new 2-story mixed-use development.
I don't see the presentation.
Oh, no?
No.
Anybody else having problems seeing it?
I see it.
Huh.
Yeah, I see it too.
That's weird.
I see it too. Maybe it's the view that you're looking at Zoom with.
Yeah, that might be. Let me try to reset that. I think that's a good. Yeah, I got it now. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have it.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and start over. Tonight we'll be reviewing a new 2-story mixed-use development consisting of 9 affordable dwelling units and 10,400 square feet of commercial space. The project also includes a request for a 40% parking reduction for the commercial uses. Tonight's recommendation is to approve the project for consistency with the Orchid Area Specific Plan and the zoning regulations based on findings and subject to the conditions identified in the draft resolution. The project site is located along Ranch House Road between Sponza Drive and Tiburon Way. The project site is located in the community commercial zone with a mixed-use overlay and is located within the Orchid Area Specific Plan. The existing site is vacant and used as a staging site for the adjacent residential developments that is part of the Jones Ranch subdivision. The project site is bordered by recently approved projects known as South Moros and Vinifera to the north, Pratt Ranch to the west, as well as Bullock Ranch, which is still under review, and a future site of the Orchid Area Park Facility to the east. The project can be considered phase 4 of the Jones Ranch Development Tract 3066 and is located, its location is dedicated for satisfying the inclusionary housing requirement that results in the 9 affordable units. Phase 1 of Jones Ranch included the 4 homestead lots, which are not shown currently on the screen, but phase 2 provided the 9 residential single-family homes that are shown on the bottom right of the screen. And phase 3 of the Jones Ranch project provided the 43 residential units through the duplexes and triplexes that are currently under construction, as well as the parking area for the mixed-use portion of the project. The project site was originally envisioned to accommodate 15,000 square feet of commercial space as part of the Tract 3066. Excuse me. There we go. The project site is limited to the area shown in red on the screen. Anything beyond the project boundaries has already been approved for construction. On February 1st, the project was reviewed by the ARC, which found it to be consistent with the Orchid Area Design Guidelines, as well as the Community Design Guidelines, and provided a recommendation to the Planning Commission for final action. The ARC provided 2 directional items for further consideration by the Planning Commission. Number 1 was parking designations for commercial activities and as well as signage for navigation. And item 2 was for privacy railings for the residential balconies. In response to the ARC's direction, staff has incorporated these conditions into the draft resolution for consideration by the Planning Commission to address the ARC's concerns. The project provides 2 direct points of access from Sponza Drive and Tiburon Way to the adjacent parking area that is intended to serve the mixed-use project. The site layout provides 4 commercial suites on the ground floor that could accommodate a variety of different tenants, and it is anticipated that a restaurant will occupy building number 2. The residential units are provided on the second floor of buildings 1A through 1C, and the project has been designed with outdoor sitting areas and other pedestrian amenities between each of the buildings and along Ranch House Road. The Orchid Area Specific Plan allows for projects up to 3 stories at this location. However, the project has been designed as a 2-story development with separate smaller structures intended to preserve the views of the natural vistas and address the compatibility with adjacent developments. The project design provides sufficient articulation with materials and colors that are consistent with design guidelines and compatible with the planned neighborhood. The Orchid Area Specific Plan provides an incentive to encourage development of commercial uses in the commercial zone by allowing the off-site parking requirements for the primary commercial areas to be reduced to 60% of that which is ordinarily required for individual uses. The project has applied for this incentive to 4 of the commercial suites, resulting in a parking reduction of 40% to provide 29 parking spaces for the commercial uses, where 48 parking spaces would normally be required. The project does not include any reductions for the residential portion of the project. In order to ensure the project does not result in a deficiency of parking spaces for the intended uses, staff recommends condition number 8 to require a trip reduction plan to reduce the vehicle parking demand of the property by outlining measures that will be implemented in an effort to reduce the number of single occupant vehicle trips generated by residences and commercial uses from the project site. And that actually concludes the staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Let me ask commissioners in order. Commissioner Khan.
Yeah, Kyle, where are the parking spots for the residences? They have garages?
You mean the parking spaces for the duplexes and triplexes, or for the 9 affordable units?
The 9 affordable units.
They'd be sharing the parking lot adjacent to the mixed-use development, just that's shown on the screen here.
So what guarantees they'd have a parking spot? It's just shared?
It's shared, yes.
Okay. I'm just concerned if we're giving them a parking reduction that the people that come home, you know, have a parking spot to their residence. That's all.
So there's nothing that would preclude the developer to designate parking spaces for residential units. That's allowed per code for them to say that, to assign specific parking spaces per residential unit. And the ARC also provided that condition regarding flexibility to allow them to designate parking for the commercial uses as well.
All right.
So that has been incorporated into the draft resolution.
Thank you.
Commissioner Quincy.
Thank you. Kyle, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the affordable housing in the sense that I noticed in the staff report, it said that the affordable housing for this this area was part of the inclusionary housing requirements for a number of other projects for Getty Ranch, Jones Ranch, Immel, and the Pratt property. How many units that are required are left to be built?
So there's an additional 55 units that are required for those tracks, and that's been designated on the Tiburon property, which is owned and controlled by People Self-Help Housing, and they have an entitlement for a project that includes 68 affordable units for low and very low incomes. So that's where the remaining of the affordable units are going to be provided for these projects.
Okay. And then how many has already been constructed? Do you know?
I don't believe I know that offhand. There may be a few, but the Tiburon Affordable Housing Project is the primary location for a majority of the units. And so I don't believe there are very many other ones that are scattered throughout the Getty Ranch development.
And that anticipated development for the People Self-Help Housing, is that that will all be in one structure, or all the affordable units will be centered in one area without any other non-affordable units?
Correct. It's the 68 units are provided between two buildings on an individual site.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. Commissioner Shorsman.
Thank you. Just to piggyback off of the previous commissioner's questions, are there any affordable, would the affordable housing allocation for this whole area include the apartment buildings? Are there any affordable units in the apartment buildings that kind of run along Orchid Road? I think it's called the Village, or that are almost completed or newly completed.
Along Orchid Road. Well, so there's several projects that are under the way right now. So we have
at the corner of Orchid and Ranch House.
Oh yes, the project previously known as West Creek, and then the apartment complex is now called Vintage.
Vintage, that's it.
They do include affordable units in that project. I'm just currently not certain of the number. I know that project's been entitled and constructed, and I believe every building is now occupied. Not completely, but I believe they're working on getting leases.
So that's probably where some of the other affordable units are, Commissioner Quincy.
Oh, I see. Oh, to provide clarification, that the affordable housing and inclusionary housing requirement for this project, it was in reference to some specific tracks that are adjacent. West Creek and South Moros and Bullock Ranch will all have their own inclusionary housing requirements to address.
Okay. Okay, and then my other question sort of related to the parking, the shared parking question, is I was unclear by looking at the designs for these 4 buildings, if the sort of front of the property is considered to be along Ranch House Road, or if there are more entrances on the, I guess you could say, the backside facing the parking for is it going to be obvious? I guess that's my crux of my question. Is it going to be obvious that people that want to drive to these 4 buildings need to park behind, and are there entrances from that side, or is it specifically facing the front entrances facing the Ranch House Road side?
Yes, and that actually directly relates to the ARC's recommendation for additional navigational signage to direct vehicles traveling to the site to the parking lot. And so we've incorporated a condition in the draft resolution in regards to the ARC's concerns, that when we review the construction documents of the project, we'll ensure that there is navigational signs included through the project layout.
Okay, and then lastly, so is it fair to say that this would kind of be like the mix on Monterey, where the intention is that the parking could be used for users of the buildings during the day, and then presumably there would be less need for people that are using the commercial spaces at night, and so that would free up the parking for residents of the housing units.
So the developer would have that option. The condition that's been incorporated into the resolution kind of gives a recommendation to assign parking for commercial uses, which would then also kind of coincide with designated residential parking as well. However, those aren't typically requirements. Those aren't normal requirements that we would do. We want to encourage shared parking. And so when we have shared parking facilities, we normally would encourage that residential parking could take over the parking lot in the evening hours, while in the commercial, when the residential units are vacant, the commercial units would then have more ability to use the parking lot.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
No questions right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilkin.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for all their efforts in answering questions and providing that through the agenda correspondence, and then doing some more individual follow-up with me. So I appreciate that. Just to make sure I'm clear on the parking for the duplexes and triplexes, as I understand it, the duplex and triplex project has 10 more parking spaces than are required for those units. Is that correct?
That is correct. And so as you can see on the screen, each duplex and triplex has individual garage parking as well as service parking scattered throughout their drive aisles. And so collectively there are 109 parking spaces aside from the parking lot that's intended for the mixed-use development. And based off of parking requirements, only 99 parking spaces are required by code. And so there would be an excess of 10 spaces available to the duplexes and triplexes, even above and beyond the guest parking requirement.
Okay, so is there anything that prevents someone who is visiting one of the commercial uses that are proposed in this project from parking in one of the guest spaces in the duplex and triplex area?
There's nothing within code that would preclude that from happening. However, if you're familiar with the Vivo Townhomes project and Tumbling Waters, which is down off of Orchid Road, a project like that, they had specific signage limiting who may park in which parking lots for the intended uses. And so this is all within the one HOA. And so they will have control over the parking between the all different uses, and the commercial uses will be under a sub HOA or a sub agreement. They'll be part of the master HOA. So they will have control over any parking discrepancies.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't see a condition on the requiring an affordable housing agreement with this project. I'm presuming that's already been taken care of through the tract 3066.
Yes, the affordable housing requirement has already been recorded. Okay,
great. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Kyle, just one quick question. The parking is at one grade, and then the units are seem like about 7, 8, 9 feet lower. Is that right? How is that? I couldn't figure out how that grade change is navigated. So people in the duplexes and triplexes will park, and then how do they get across to their units?
Oh, for the duplexes and triplexes?
Yeah.
I believe they have access through their garages for where they park.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the mixed use.
For the mixed use. So yes, the developer could decide to designate parking for the residential uses, and that could be located anywhere in the mixed use parking lot. And they would be able to walk up to their units, but there's no area to drive right up to your unit or anything like that. Maybe if you can repeat the question so that I could better understand it.
So there would be staircases down to the grade level. Is that right?
Oh yes. So we can look at the project plans, and we can look at a floor plan if you'd like.
Well, I was surprised at how much of a great difference there was between the parking area and then where the site seems to be.
It's all relatively flat. Let's see. So maybe we can, maybe I'll get this loaded and we can have the applicant touch on this as well.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, there's a section you just passed by. So, oh,
yeah. So
so
there's
it's not very. Okay, maybe it's just because it's being excavated right now. It seemed like it was much more. Thank you.
No problem.
I have no further questions. I think the next agenda item is applicant presentation. Would the applicant wish to present?
Yes, Kevin, if you could unmute Scott Martin's mic, and I'll be controlling the presentation on his behalf, and he can just tell me to go to the next slide. Scott, if you are able to unmute yourself and let us know.
I hope I did, Kyle. I'm trying. It's weird when that transition happens. You get kind of kicked out for a second, then back in. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Kyle, thank you so much for your presentation. Chair and commissioners, again, I don't know how you do this in this sort of realm. I am constantly impressed by your dedication to sit at your dining tables and other facilities to do this. So thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciate the opportunity tonight. I'm going to do my best to kind of answer some of the questions you already brought up through correspondence and just now, but I am available for questions afterwards as well. We have a brief presentation that I hope addresses any potential concerns, but I also, the applicant is available as well if there's more operational questions. Again, I'm Scott Martin. I'm a principal architect at RRM Design Group. It's been a pleasure to work on this project and the Orchid Area Specific Plan for what is about a decade now. It's been fun. You know, the OSAP, as I refer to it, was approved over 10 years ago now. So it's great to see these long-term planning projects actually come to fruition in a way that is meaningful and providing the housing and city policy goals that we're looking for throughout the community. So with that, I'd love to give you a little bit of history and then dive into the project a little bit more. Next slide, please, Kyle. Kyle, are you even able to point if I need you to? Is that going too far? Is that asking too much? Oh, I appreciate that. The red asterisk is sort of the center of the OASP. We are the hatch pattern just to the north of that, or planned north anyways. And Jones Ranch, I wanted to point this out. The Jones Tract is what's outlined in blue. So we are dead middle of the project. And from a contextual standpoint, we've seen a lot of development happen around the sites. The affordable housing, the People's Project that was mentioned is to the plan south of here. The Tank Farm is far on the right, closest to Rigetti Hill and the open space. So that's the major traffic thoroughway through here. The railroad runs across the plan south, which is quite a barrier, as you were previously talking about on your earlier project. And then Vintage and Noveno, aka West Creek, is sort of the plan east border of the project. And so there's quite a bit of development happening around this. This really was sort of seen as the center of the project, the heart of the project, but not as, it's a little bit different of a mixed use environment. I think that needs to be acknowledged right off the bat. If you go to the next slide, there are amenity rich at the center of this plan. The developer here tonight has worked on everything sort of here to the southeast, plan east anyways. Rigetti Ranch and the trail system, the neighborhood park, which I think is just an absolute huge anchor for the center of this residential development. And then this project site is right there next to it. we really see the synergy and the relationship between the neighborhood park and the surrounding residential to really make this what's going to be feasible and possible. To the south is a mix of live work units, a standalone office, and then some more higher density residential, both detached single family townhome type of arrangements. And then all the way to the south there in orange is that affordable housing project that was brought up. So there's quite a product mix throughout the OSAP and quite a product mix delivered by this developer. Next slide, please. So connectivity and adjacencies important throughout the circulation element of the specific plan, and it all kind of centers around this project here. But I wanted to make sure that we were all aware that, you know, the multimodal approach to the OSAP and the de-emphasis of the vehicle was always at the forefront. So while it geographically is centrally located within the site, it is more pedestrian and bicycle friendly than it is vehicular friendly. So the major circulation to get there comes from Tank Farm around the roundabout, kind of meanders through the project before you get to the neighborhood park, and again go around the roundabout. Whereas if I'm a resident and I actually live, you know, there will be thousands of residents by the time the whole project is built out or the whole specific plan is built out. It's almost more cumbersome for me to get in a car to get down to the neighborhood commercial, to these purposely designed small facilities. It'd be much easier for me to grab the kids and walk down there, or hop on the bike and take one of the multitude of class 1, class 2 and multimodal paths throughout the project. So from its impetus, this whole area has been seen to de-emphasize the car. And I think that this is an embodiment of that as you start to see our project. Next slide, please, Kyle. You know, the real goal of this project and the Orchid Area Specific Plan is to provide the housing stock that San Luis Obispo so badly needs. This does meet the inclusionary housing for some of the adjacent properties between this and the People's property. These are some of the for sale product that will be available. There's quite a bit of variety of product around. I think everybody saw that, and it's all sort of centered around this park and this location. There was also policy goal and program within the specific plan to create that centrally located neighborhood serving commercial. And I want to stress the neighborhood in that. I can't imagine people, you know, I work on Tank Farm, and I couldn't imagine trying to get here for lunch even. It is off the beaten path and not as accessible as a common neighbor, you know, strip center, if you will. So I do think it is really targeting specifically these neighborhoods in the OSAP. We're consistent with everything within the OSAP. We think we're aligned with the project vision. In fact, I was re-looking at the specific plan today. If you look at page 315, I think our site plan is almost like exactly what the original vision concept was for that. A little less overall square footage, but the idea of a series of small buildings in a mixed use format right along the main boulevard, which is now called Ranch House Road. Next slide, please. This has been going on for a while through the mapping process. There was a conceptual architectural review as well. The final maps were approved 5 years ago. That included some of the single family that Kyle talked about, the duplexes, the triplexes, and even the property here for the mixed use. That then we, as each of these products have come online, we've now developed and went to ARC. We got some really good feedback and design direction on on the multi-units, the duplex and triplexes, which are right next door. As part of that plan, the parking lot that provides parking for this mixed-use project was built as part of that plan. And that just happens to be where the share of uses and the property lines fall. The single families were occupancy permits in 2020 up above. We completed our application and then went to ARC hearing for this mixed use project in February, and with very positive feedback and some great direction. We thought what came out of there was helpful and constructive, and is going to make the project even better. So here we are tonight. Next slide, if you will. Here's our project and what it looks like. Chair Dandekar, I think you were talking about that grade change. Yes, if you look at the parking lot that's on Plan North right now, outside of the property line, but that is the parking for this project, it is somewhat the back of the commercial. We thought it was very important for the commercial to have a street presence. There's design guidelines and policy direction towards that. So the commercial frontages are towards Ranch House, as well as having side entries and access points. Building 2 on the page right looks out over the park, and we see a great connectivity possibility with that open space and those facilities that are there as well. The main pedestrian access, if you were at the duplexes or triplexes, or if you were a residential person who did drive somewhere to work. I mean, in a perfect world, mixed use, you live right above where you work, right? But if you did park your car in the parking lot or were coming from the duplex or triplexes, there's stairs and an ADA ramp right in the middle of the project. There's kind of 2 orange dots. Kyle's got it right there. It's not that big of a grade change. It is 4 feet or so. There is some grade change there, which actually I think we've used to our benefit. We've provided some landscaping buffer, but it also kind of screens some of the back of house of retail. I think that's always the hardest thing in a mixed use project is retail buildings still need a back of house. They still need the ugly end, if you will, the electrical room, the fire riser, those sorts of things. And what we did is we enhanced that by putting the residential access on the back half, which is what faces the duplex. So the most common area of the residential units are those stairs, and then they lead to common courtyards above, but they access off the back of the units, whereas the more public areas are really in that center plaza, the corner plaza, and the frontage and public realm that is along Ranch House Way. So that was sort of the impetus behind how the project developed. Next slide, if you will. Here's some of the architectural character and rendering of the project. We felt it important to keep in character, not only character, but also massing and scale of the surrounding neighborhood. Seen in the upper left is that center plaza. There's a covered outdoor element on one of the buildings. The idea of providing pedestrian facilities, plazas, outdoor dining, even a little fireplace where people could sit. That was well received by the community, the applicant, and everybody else. You can see some of the residential private outdoor space on the upper levels. The lower right image shows the corner plaza. This would come right off the roundabout across from the public park. That's across the street. 2-story volume, a variety, a mixture of architectural treatment, but still in character and scale with the duplexes, triplexes, and surrounding. Next slide, please. The color materials that were presented and well received by ARC. Great comment was about the visibility and opacity of the residential balconies, their private outdoor space. So we did take to heart the comments from ARC and have provided sort of where we're leaning with a less visible railing system. Previously, it was sort of that hog wire look, something still in character, but now we're looking at more of a horizontal or vertical slat system that allows for code requirements, but isn't 100% block, still allows light and ventilation through there. So we think that's more in keeping. We've shown this to staff and talked to them. Next slide, please. So this was brought up. I know Kyle and I have had this discussion about condominium requirements and compliance, and this isn't a R1, R2, R3 zone, but it is condominiums. So there's some language issues there in the subdivision requirements. It is our intention to make these for sale condominiums. As a result, we did want to provide the required outdoor space, the laundry, the storage, the common space, but we're really struggling with some of the amenity size versus the project size and location. As you can see, every unit has the needed minimum dimension for its private outdoor space. Some of them do come really close to the 100 square feet that's recommended. We're at like 83 average or so, I think. So there's some of the decks are bigger than others, but they all do have private outdoor space as well as storage space off of those decks, not within the unit. Places for the surfboard or backpacking or whatever it is you need. From a common open space standpoint, this is a typical building. So above each of the mixed use buildings are 3 units, and we provided this sort of entry courtyard as you come up the stairs. There's about a 250 square foot courtyard. If you look at the overall site plan, we could provide more on-site residential dedicated space, but it's really, it wants to feel more public realm on that ground floor. We think this serves the intent of the recommendation of size. It gives a place for neighbors to say hi to each other and have that semi-private space. They have the private space on their decks. They have a semi-private space of the three units for each building. And then they have the semi-public space of the on-site ground level, both, intermixing with the retail facilities as well. Laundry is provided on site. Like other projects in the surrounding, we really think the recreation facilities, I know, while recommended for a project even of only 9 units, there is a huge recreational facility right across the street in the neighborhood park, and I think it really is built for the community and serves those needs. Next slide, please. Want to just touch upon some of the bike storage. It's called out in the plan set. There is both short-term and long-term. The units have ground floor access to long-term bike storage, and just wanted to make sure it was accommodated, as we really do see that as one of the primary modes of transportation. Next slide, please, Kyle. I know parking's been brought up. We're working on a trip reduction plan, and just sort of wanted to talk through that with you so you understood our strategy. Again, I don't envision this. You're not getting national tenants in here. It's too far off the beaten path. There's not enough rooftops to draw, but there is a great pedestrian shed within this neighborhood, and I think you're gonna get a large amount of walkability from the surrounding homes. I think the home run would be, a coffee shop that everybody could walk to, or could stop their bike at and grab something on the way to work or something. I think some professional office would be great. A restaurant would be great. Nothing is determined so far. It's still flex space right now, but we really do see it serving the neighborhood. It's bike friendly. It's very close in proximity to bike facilities, pedestrian paths, and bus stops are within a couple hundred feet. The whole neighborhood itself, if you've seen Vintage, if you've seen Noveo, if you've seen Rigetti, it's very, it's linked in with outdoor space. It's a very healthy lifestyle in general. People are walking, people are biking, people are hiking. That's why so many of us love San Luis Obispo, and I think this neighborhood even further heightens that. We're definitely thinking of things for the trip reduction program to include a residential brochure to talk about the multimodal options available and encourage rideshare for employees. Next slide, please. So tonight we're here. It's been a process. I think it's been a fun one, and I think this project has continued to grow and evolve and gotten better along the way. But we're looking to get going on this. We'd love to see these actually get built from here. So we're asking for your approval of the draft resolution. We've worked a lot with staff. We really appreciate their efforts, and we think this is heading towards a great project for fulfilling the vision of the Orchid area specifically. Next slide. With that, I'm going to say thank you. I know I ran through a lot. I hope I answered all your questions, but I'm happy to answer any direct ones or any that come up along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Scott. I appreciated contextualizing this site, and it's very confusing. You forget what was approved 5 years ago and so on. So thank you for that. Commissioners, do we have questions for the applicant? Let me ask Commissioner, just go down the line. Commissioner Khan?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Quincy?
Scott, is there any other commercial in the vicinity or the adjacent properties?
Yeah, great question, Commissioner. Right across Ranch House Road, by actually the same applicant, it is envisioned a similar zoning. What this applicant, what you see colored here is controlled by this applicant, and there's a corner small office facility planned, as well as what ended up working out better for that project was a series of live work units. So right there, that Kyle's got his mouse over. Those are ground floor small offices, providing maybe an architect or an accountant, a professional, the ability to have a small store frontage, actually have some frontage out on Ranch House Way, but a garage behind, and then still have a 3-bedroom house up above. So it's very minor in nature. And I think that's what the market's kind of driven everything towards. This was never envisioned as large amounts of retail, but there is some ground floor presence across the street. Kyle, maybe you know better. I don't know anything of the property next to this one.
Yeah, so in total, we have 3,400 square feet of commercial space for the Pratt Ranch, which is directly across the street, as Scott had mentioned. And then the project next door, which is Bullock Ranch, which is still under entitlement review, is currently proposing 585 square feet of commercial space, as well as live work units. So this will be really the primary area for commercial activity for this project that we're looking at today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shorsman?
I just have two, or maybe just one, two quick questions. One is, I think you said the parking, the bicycle parking for the residents, the indoor storage is first floor. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then my other question was...
There it is, Kyle. You can see it right there under the stairs, long-term bike store. Yep.
Okay. And then my other question was prompted by seeing the visual of the courtyard between all the units, and learning that the access basically to the residential units is on the back side of the building, closer to the parking area. Are those staircases locked or secured to residents, or would they be open so that people that might be using the commercial space accidentally walk up the stairs, or how is there security there?
Again, I think, well, maybe just here would show it well. The stair entries are actually to the, in between the two buildings marked 1, there's a 17-foot dimension. That's the entry to the stair. So it really is on the back side of the building. I don't think a non-malicious person would not go up there thinking they're heading towards commercial. I think there's a scale and a presence of commercial storefront, double doors, awnings, signage on the retail buildings that it wouldn't just be confusion. That being said, that there is currently not a plan to lock gates or anything like that. I think just you could walk across the street and go right to someone's front door as well. And these condos will have visitors and others as well too. So I think we purposely placed the bottom of the stairs away from the center plaza to help provide some of that sense of privacy and ownership. You know, these smaller plazas between the two buildings, as opposed to the bigger plaza, is where you enter the residential courtyard. So it feels much more secure. I hope that answered that.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
I have no questions right now.
Commissioner Wilkin.
I have no questions for the applicant, but I did have a couple of questions for staff when we get to that.
Okay. And I have no questions either. So I think let's hear public comments, and then perhaps Commissioner Wilkin, you can ask staff when we come to deliberations. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
There's no public comment at this time. Let me just remind the public that's in attendance that if you would like to make a comment, you can just raise your hand. We'll give you a few seconds to do so if you would like to. Seeing none, there is no public comment.
Thank you.
Chair Dandekar.
Thank you. Commissioners, we're open for deliberation on this project. Do you have any concerns? Commissioner Wilkins, would you like to ask staff the questions you had?
Yes, thank you. Since the Mr. Martin brought up the idea of condominiums in the future, not as part of this application, it triggered some questions in my mind for staff. First of all, if the applicant does apply for condominiums for the residential, 9 residential units, would that come back to the Planning Commission, or not come back? Would that go to the Planning Commission for review?
No, that would be reviewed under a parcel map, which would be a hearing by the subdivision. It would be a subdivision hearing by the director on one of the Monday afternoon hearings.
Okay, and if the residential units were condominiums, would they need to meet the residential open space requirements of the subdivision regulations? And aren't those standards rather than recommendations, as the applicant suggested?
So it's different between residential zoning property and commercial zoning property. And so with commercial zoning property, there are no requirements. However, for commercial properties, for non-residential specifically, it's up to the reviewing authority to determine the appropriate amount of open space upon the approval of a project. And so the applicant has shown tonight some work that they've done to incorporate those requirements to the best of their ability, and that would be vetted by the subdivision hearing officer to determine whether or not that is sufficient for the proposed project. At this time, the staff has not evaluated a subdivision application for this project at this time, so I don't have any additional background on where staff is at with the current proposal. Before us today is purely an architectural review application, and that's what the project was evaluated for.
Right, although if we're establishing the design of the units or approving the design of the units now, it would be good to know if they're going to meet future condominium standards or not. So if I understood you correctly, technically this mixed use residential project would not need to meet the 100 square foot private open space requirements because they are in a commercial zone, not in a residential zone. Is that correct? I think I heard you say that.
Correct. And so unless the subdivision hearing officer says that that's a requirement through a condition of approval or a continuance of the project, or if the hearing officer elevates the project to the Planning Commission with recommendations such as that, those are all still on the table. And so yes, you are correct that there could still be changes to the architectural design depending upon the outcome of the subdivision. When the project was being reviewed for completeness, we weren't aware at that time that there would be a follow-up application for subdivision. So once the project was deemed complete, we were required to move through the hearing process in accordance with the Housing Accountability Act and due process.
Okay, thank you.
Any commissioners, floor is open if you want to raise anything. Commissioner Shorsman.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Wilkins' comments, or at least I think what I was reading between the lines a little bit about maybe some concerns about the amount of open space. Normally, I would be concerned with the amount of open space available to privately to the units. But I think my concerns are sort of lesser, knowing that there's a pretty big size park, literally, as Scott points out, across the street from this. I run and walk this neighborhood a lot. It's not far from where I live, and I agree with you, Scott. It's going to be an extremely, well, it's already a very runnable and walkable area, and I don't know that I would necessarily agree that it will be easier to walk and ride in than drive a car. Unfortunately, I wish it were a little more so easier to walk and ride a bike than drive a car. But there is a lot of walkability and rideability in the area, and I appreciate. I ride a bike, and so I appreciate the first floor bike parking that you've incorporated. Bikes going upstairs is not fun for anyone. And so I am a big supporter of putting those kinds of amenities on first floor, in first floor rooms, especially indoors for long-term storage. I did have one change to that I'd like to propose for consideration by the other commissioners to one of the items in the resolution. It's item number 9. And I thank you, Kyle. I asked him to put it on a slide. This is language that we used pretty recently, actually, in the Aero Vista development, where they had some indoor bike storage. And in consideration of that project, we talked about the ability to put all different sizes of bikes in the indoor long-term storage and to accommodate, heavier bikes rather than just using wall-mounted racks. And so for the commission's consideration, I'd like to propose adding one sentence to condition number 9, and Kyle has put it there. Just the sentence to be inserted in between some of the language that's already there, saying that long-term bicycle parking spaces shall provide charging capability for e-bikes and shall provide a variety of floor and wall-mounted racks to accommodate bicycles that vary in size, shape, and weight. And so this is just to try and, again, increase rideability, and with the increase in e-bikes, and e-bike is a really great idea for this neighborhood. Just they're heavy. They're heavy, and they can be awkward sizes, especially for small people. So having some options in the indoor storage for long-term parking, I think, is a good addition. Other than that, I think this is a great project. I hope to ride my bike to it and bring my family down to whatever restaurant is there. It'll be probably a 1.5 mile walk or bike, and I'll look forward to it. I think the only other, to answer one of the questions that was brought up earlier, I think the only other real commercial space that's existing in that neighborhood right now are the businesses on Broad, and maybe the little Laurel shopping center that has Efren's in it and is supposed to have another restaurant coming who knows when, and there's a coffee shop in there now. So that's the closest thing nearby that I can think of. Those are all my comments, and I look forward to hearing if any of the other commissioners will support this suggested language to condition number 9.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Commissioner Quincy and then Commissioner Khan and then Jorgensen to comment.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I am supportive of that condition. Thank you, Commissioner Shorsman. I think that's a good add, so I would be supportive of that. My questions previously were sort of centered around an idea that that I sort of took issue with on another project we had about where the affordable housing is located. I guess I should preface it by saying I support this. I'm going to vote to approve this, but you know, the City Council voted recently for their 2021 to 2023 goals, city goals, and one of them was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we also, as a planning commission, agreed that diversity, equity, and inclusion would permeate all our decisions. And it just seems to me that on some of these affordable housing requirements, that the affordable housing is being located in an area with all affordable housing, which is not inclusive, in my opinion, and in lesser desirable areas, which is not equitable, in my opinion. You know, this is one of very few commercial areas in the whole area, and the affordable housing is going on top. And I personally would not want to live above a commercial if I had a preference. So I just wanted to point that out, that's a concern I have, but I do plan on supporting this and voting to approve. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Khan?
I too support the addition of that condition on the bicycling and the e-bikes. And I went by and visited the project tonight, and I think it's going to be a nice project. That's the only comments I have, and I'll plan to support it. Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
I too am ready to support the project, and I do like Commissioner Shorsman's explication of the rack designs and how this ought to work. And I'm hoping this becomes kind of standard language in our conditions. Take us a little bit to quite get there. You'd think, I would have thought we had already been there, but somehow we need to articulate it. This is a really big project that goes back, 15 years or so, with multiple owners and a whole bunch of complications. And there's such a mix of things going on that I think I'm just ready to let it play out. And I think it's actually going to turn out to be quite interesting. So I think I'm less concerned than Commissioner Quincy that that there's too much bunching together of affordable housing. I just feel like there's just such a variety of things that are going on that I think everybody will know there's a lot of variety. I think some people will find the housing above the commercial very enticing. But we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've gone the round unless Commissioner Wilkins needs to add anything. I think we're...
Sure, I'll weigh in. I support the project. I think it's generally consistent with the Orchid Area Specific Plan. I think the proposed parking reduction is reasonable given the staff's recommendation for a trip reduction plan, and also the fact that there are more spaces than required in the adjacent project. And I think that Commissioner Quincy's point is well taken about the concentration of affordable units in one place. I think with respect to this project, that decision has already been made and was made a while ago. But as a commission, we've had this discussion on a couple of projects that I was involved in. And I think one of the problems is that it's difficult to get affordable housing built otherwise without having it concentrated and developed by one developer, such as a housing authority or people self-help. So it's a problem. But I agree with the sentiment. In fact, the Commissioner Quincy's sentiment is actually stated in the housing element that we recently reviewed, that the affordable housing should be dispersed and not concentrated. But anyway, as far as this project, I think that decision's been already been made, and but I appreciate the comment. So I'm prepared to support the project with the amended condition 9.
So what I'm hearing is a consensus on amendment to condition 9 and a support for this project. I'd just like to add my 2 bits because much of what I was thinking has already been said. I'm actually very happy with this design, particularly after Mr. Smith explained sort of the centrality of this particular subdivision. And I think I think that the 9 units on top of commercial might be really attractive to some families. And right behind it, we have some scattered site affordable housing. So in this particular context, I think it gives a kind of variety that we haven't seen before. What we see typically is what apparently is going to be proposed somewhere else in this area, where you have a substantial number of units in a multifamily housing apartment complex, not unlike the one I was complaining about in the Marigold subdivision. The idea that very narrow access points, a lot of apartments in 3-story, 4-story structures. So I feel like I think that this project and its adjacent project is offering some variety to the palette of things we've been approving for construction on the affordable side of things. I like the design. I think that the design is interesting, and the designers have made the most of a rather nice site. And particularly when there's live work right opposite it, I think the possibility of getting some kind of a streetscape going is good. So overall, I'm happy to support this project. Having said that, I think we are ready for a motion and a second, unless somebody has a final comment to make.
I would just like to make one other comment I just thought about in this discussion. I used to live in Capitola, and I lived above a clothing store in downtown Capitola, and I actually, as a young man, really enjoyed it, and it was vibrant, and I think this will be good entry-level housing for a young couple that wants to buy something when it becomes a condominium and enjoy that. So I think it will work. That's just my 2 cents. And with that, I'd be willing to make a motion to adopt draft resolution approving the project based on findings and subject to conditions of approval, and amend condition 9 as earlier stated in our deliberation.
I'd second that.
So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Khan, seconded by Commissioner Jorgensen. Discussion? I see none. So will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion?
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy,
Yes.
Commissioner Shorsman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin,
Yes.
Chair Dandekar.
Yes.
Motion passes with Commissioner Hopkins recused.
Thank you. Perhaps we can invite Commissioner Hopkins back in to the meeting now.
Hello, Chair Deniker, I'm back.
Good. We have
Chairwoman
the
Deniker,
final.
if I could just make a quick comment, if you don't mind, about the affordable housing. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay, so I just want to make sure you can hear me.
You have the floor, Michael.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just appreciate those comments on affordable housing. There's two things I wanted to mention. One is that within the Orchid area, basically every housing type that we have in the Orchid area, there is also affordable housing of that type. So we do have detached single-family homes, we have apartments, we have townhomes that are attached. And so for rent and for sale, it all exists within the Orchid area, but the comments are well received, and we agree that that's a focus for us. And what I wanted to highlight is that the inclusionary housing ordinance is due for an update. It's part of our work program. It's something that we will be bringing back during this financial plan period. So in terms of that being a goal of the City Council and a goal of the Planning Commission, we'll have an opportunity in the future to discuss our inclusionary housing requirement and can take a look at that particular issue as it relates to concentration of units and types of units and everything like that. So just wanted to provide that background and recognize and appreciate the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. That's good to hear because this is a comment that has been persistent in the last few years as we've approved projects. Our concern. Item 4 on the agenda is to receive and file the general plan annual report for 2020. Would Assistant Planner Graham Baltimore please provide the presentation? Graham, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair Dandekar, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Graham, and item I am presenting for you today is consideration for the 2020 General Plan Annual Report. Let me share my screen. You guys able to see this?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Staff recommends for the Planning Commission to receive and file the 2020 General Plan Annual Report for final acceptance by City Council. The purpose of the General Plan Annual Report is to comply with the City Land Use Element Policy 11.3 and California state law, and to review implementation of general plan programs. There are a total of 8 elements in the city's general plan. This list gives an overview of the elements, when they were adopted, and upcoming element updates. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the city's emergency operations plan was implemented, which established City Council as the city's disaster council. And throughout 2020, the city adopted several resolutions as the city continued to adapt to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic locally. Some of these resolutions have included allowing downtown businesses and restaurants to expand operations to sidewalks and streets as part of social distancing efforts, and extending deadlines for discretionary approvals and building permit applications. Summaries of these resolutions can be seen in Table 1 on packet page 119. Throughout 2020, staff worked to improve customer service and process improvements, including continued upgrades to InfoSlow and implementation of the Tip Fast program, which streamlines review of tenant improvement projects. Staff also continued to coordinate with partner agencies on projects throughout the city. For planning and building activity, a total of 242 planning applications were received in 2020, about 30% less than 2019. Notable application types that decreased included architectural reviews, homestay permits, and tentative subdivision requests. For building permits, a total of 632 building permits were issued in 2020, about 10% less than 2019. Almost all permit types issued were down from 2019 to 2020. So the sixth cycle housing element period began in January 2019, and the housing element update for the sixth cycle was adopted by City Council in November 2020. Staff expects a response from the State Department of Housing and Community Development about certification of the housing element in the next few weeks. The city's RHNA allocation for the sixth cycle is 3,354 units, as seen here in Table 5 and packet page 126. In 2020, the city permitted 465 new housing units towards quantified objectives. For residential growth, land use element policy LUE 1.11.2 regarding residential growth states that the city's housing supply shall grow no faster than 1% per year on average. In 2020, 261 housing units were constructed in the city, and the annual growth rate for 2020 was 1.21%. A significant portion of these new units are located within specific plan areas. LUE policy 1.11.2 states that approved specific plan areas may develop in accordance with the phasing schedules adopted by each specific plan, provided that thresholds established by LUE Table 3 are not exceeded. The net total number of units in the city that are subject to residential growth rate limitations as of 2020 is 21,501 units, seen in this table, which is below the 2020 threshold of 22,190 units specified in LUE Table 3, seen on packet page 131. The city has maintained a 6-year average annual growth per year from 2015 to 2020 in compliance with LUE Table 3 and the maximum average annual growth rate. For non-residential growth in 2020, 34,352 square feet of net new non-residential floor area was added to the city. The annual growth rate for 2020 was 0.29%, which continues to be consistent with land use policies. Staff continued implementing and developing several specific plans throughout 2020 as well. Progress in the Margarita area included continued construction of the Toscano subdivision and completion of Courtyard at the Meadows affordable housing project. The largest properties in the Margarita area, the Damon Garcia properties, have yet to be developed and have an estimated residential capacity of 408 units. When combined with the 442 units completed or in the development process, the total comes close to the estimated capacity of 868 units for the Margarita area. Progress in the Orcutt area included continued construction of Rigetti Ranch and West Creek subdivisions. Other new projects in the development process in Orcutt area include Tiburon Place Affordable Housing Project and the Jones Mixed Use Project. In the airport area specific plan, many large projects are currently in various stages of the development review process, including 175 Venture, Northwest Corner, 650 Tank Farm, and 600 Tank Farm. Multiple projects are also currently in process in San Luis Ranch, with a total of 654 units in the development process. The city has entitled all of the residential development in San Luis Ranch at this time Additional entitlements are also anticipated in the near future for the commercial area, which will include affordable housing, retail, office, and hotel components. For Froome Ranch, the final EIR was released in June 2020 and certified by City Council in September 2020. City Council also authorized an annexation application to be considered by LAFCO in spring 2021. Staff continue to work on updates to the city's municipal code throughout 2020 as well. For the city's ADU ordinance, it was updated in February 2020 in response to new state legislation. Changes included removing owner occupancy requirements and allowing units to be developed in multifamily structures. The Clean Energy Choice Program was also amended in 2020 to provide regulatory flexibility to support all electric new buildings. For climate action, progress continued on climate action in 2020 as well. These actions included joining Central Coast Community Energy in January 2020, adoption of the Climate Action Plan in September 2020, and beginning research for a building retrofit program in fall 2020. For water supply, in 2020, the city's available water supply included 10,107 acre feet of water, which was consistent with the city's current water supply needs. And this table is on packet page 145. For circulation, numerous traffic signal and intersection improvements were completed as part of the city's traffic safety program in 2020. Staff also continued the engineering and environmental review process for the Prado Road Highway 101 interchange and is progressing through the design process for the Anholm Neighborhood Greenway Plan. The fire department continued to take steps in 2020 to improve protection of city residents and prepare for other potential dangers. One update of note this year for the fire department was the completion of the 2019 Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, which was formally adopted by City Council in June 2020. Fire department also continued to conduct critical safety inspections in the city throughout 2020. The police department also continued to make progress in 2020 towards crime reduction, traffic safety, community outreach, and police operations. Included a variety of training efforts such as crisis intervention training, as well as continued coordination to promote neighborhood wellness and civility throughout the city. For conservation and open space, highlights from 2020 included dedication of Rigetti Hill for open space and a future trail system, continued surveys of steelhead trout in San Luis Obispo Creek, and ongoing efforts to prepare the Miasi open space property to open for recreational use by spring 2021. Parks and Recreation staff continue to make progress in 2020 on the master plan and element update. A public review draft was released and introduced to the Parks and Recreation Commission in March 2021. Another highlight from Parks and Recreation was the completion of the Islay Park Playground project in September 2020, pictured here. And for the city's public art program, new public art installations continued in the city in 2020, such as the Archway to Happiness, pictured here at the Marsh Street parking garage. And so to conclude, the general plan annual report conforms with land use element policy 11.3 and state law. The general plan annual report provides you, the Planning Commission, with an opportunity to review implementation of general plan programs in 2020. And any comments that the commission makes during this review will be forwarded to City Council for consideration. And that concludes this presentation. Hopefully I didn't go too quickly. And I have provided staff recommendation again here for your convenience. And I'll take any questions you guys have.
Thank you very much, Graham. That's a lot of things have been happening and an excellent overview. I appreciate that. Commissioners, do we have questions for staff.
Chair Dendekar, I have a question. So this might be more for Michael or Tyler, but glad the inclusionary housing ordinance discussion came up right before this. When we discussed the housing element, I recalled that we would be visiting that at some point this year. I know you mentioned that it'd be part of the financial plan, so I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity as to if we expect to review that this year, just given I guess I'm seeing the arena numbers and feeling a little bit more urgency. And of course, with COVID, hearing about the urgency in the community as well. So just wanted to see when we have an opportunity to revisit that ordinance.
Sure, it's a great question. We've kind of outlined our schedule for that particular project. And at this time, we have as just a recap, we did complete a Nexus study last year that kind of set the foundation for what we'd be looking at in terms of potential recommendations and things to focus on with updating our inclusionary housing ordinance. With that, we also need to pair a financial analysis, which we're going to be embarking on in the next month or so, which will look at kind of the financial aspects of feasibility with making modifications one way or another to that ordinance in terms of how that may affect development potential and values. And so we will look to bring back kind of a draft by the end of the calendar year. That's our target is in the housing element. It's a 1 year from adoption goal to bring this back to Planning Commission and City Council. And so we are looking to bring that back in probably October or November to the commission.
Thank you. I really appreciate that update. Yeah, I'd love to get that in front of us, of course, as soon as possible. I think everyone wants to see it, and we all want to do as much as we can, I think, to help folks out that are struggling right now. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Other comments, commissioners? Commissioner Wilkin.
Thank you. I had one question and a few suggestions. I guess I'll save the suggestions for until after public comment, if there is any. My question has to do with Table 7 on residential growth, and I think an excerpt of that was actually on one of the slides that we saw during the staff presentation. The question is that I wasn't clear about whether the numbers of units indicated under new units, for example, the 261, if those units are a total number of units, or are those the ones that are subject to the growth rate limitation? Because there are a number of units that are exempted from the growth rate limitation. For example, units in the downtown, accessory dwelling units, and affordable housing. So is that 261 number total or just the qualified units?
That 261 is the total constructed in the city, and then when we calculated so that growth rate percentage for 2020, 1.21%, that doesn't take into account that's considering the 261. So if you remove the 210 in specific plan areas, that percentage would go down. So and as LUE policy 1.11.2 states, those specific plan units are allowed to develop in accordance with those phasing schedules from those specific plans.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was getting at. So if you took out the accessory dwelling units, the affordable housing and downtown development, the growth rate would be a lot less than 1.21, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so, technically the official growth rate is 1.21, but those 210 units in specific plan areas are not in violation because they are being developed in accordance with their phasing schedules.
Okay. All right, thank you. I may have a comment on that later or suggestion, but anyway, that's the only question I have.
Commissioner Wilkin, I think you should go ahead with comments because we're not going to have public input on this. This is, we're just to receive this general plan. I don't believe public comments are.
Oh, I thought we needed to hear from
So
the
we
public.
should open up public comment for this item. Chairwoman Damnikar, this is a public hearing on your agenda, so we will take public comment. I'm not sure if there are any members in the audience that want to speak to it. I did want to take a moment just to talk a little bit about residential growth. I was hoping there'd be a question on it, just because what I wanted to highlight is the way that we're tracking this. And in terms of the numbers on the slide here that Graham is showing, the residential growth of 22,190, that was the maximum, that was our threshold number for 2020. And now we're into a new sort of 5-year cycle where our new maximum is 23,322. This progresses according to Table 3 of the land use element through 2035. And the point that I wanted to highlight is that with all the specific plan development that we have going on and with some of the rezonings that we've been able to accomplish recently, either completed those entitlements or have initiated the project in the case of 600 Tank Farm. And with the other projects in the housing element that are housing supply projects like our Missing Middle project and our flexible density project for downtown, basically we are at a place where our inventory is sufficient to build out to the 25,762 units through 2035. And so what I wanted to highlight is that the city has housing production as a major city goal. We're accomplishing that goal. I think that this general plan annual report shows that with the growth rate over 1% for the year in this case, but we still have a lot of capacity to get up to the 5 or 6 year average of 1%. But we're still getting requests to rezone property, and not only that, but we're getting requests of people outside the urban reserve on areas on our periphery to annex and develop. And so, council members are hearing from individuals, staff is hearing from individuals that are property owners or developers that are speculating that want to bring more property into the city's urban reserve for the purposes of development or want to rezone commercial land for that purpose. And I highlight that to say that at this point, city staff is not really engaging with those individuals because the way our plans have been pursued at this point, we have sufficient inventory of residential land to meet our growth objectives, and certainly don't want to exceed the urban reserve capacity during that time. As you know, a lot goes into planning for these numbers. It's water supply and our circulation system, emergency response. There's just a wide variety of factors that we consider in setting the growth rate and in identifying these numbers that are a proxy for population. And so probably the next time to really start thinking about new residential growth areas will be when we see our next RHNA numbers with the 2028 housing element cycle. And those numbers usually come out in advance. So, we could get those in, late 2026 or early 2027. But just want to highlight where we stand right now relative to residential growth. I'm going to have a similar conversation with the city council because I know that they're hearing from individuals that want to see, even more residential growth. But currently, based on the city's general plan policies, our land use element, circulation element, and our overall land use element goals in the general plan, staff is not recommending further rezonings, and we're certainly not going to recommend initiating any applications for new annexations or new expansion areas outside our urban reserve during this period of time. So thanks for the opportunity to share that information.
No, thank you very much.
And then I wanted to just clarify, I think, some of the information that Graham responded to Commissioner Wilkin. In this table that's on the screen, the 261 is the number that excludes the accessory dwelling units, downtown development, and affordable units. So this is reporting on general plan policy. And so that's, this is a policy in the general plan. And so this is the 261 and our growth management regs reflect, those exclusions. And so the 0.6%, the 0.60% is a 6-year average based on those exclusions. We do separately track, obviously, all of our units to make sure that we're, consistent with being able to service and have water supply and wastewater and other utility services available. But for general plan tracking purposes, this is the number based on those exclusions.
Interesting. Are there, yes, Commissioner Shorsman?
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about Table 5 on page 20, I believe, of the report, or packet page 126. It lists, it's called Progress Towards Meeting 6-Cycle Qualified Objectives. And it looks like, if I'm reading it correctly, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. It looks like it lists a total number of units, 6-cycle RHNA allocation, and it looks like that column is listing the number of units in extremely low and very low, low and moderate, and above moderate housing types. And then it looks like the columns after that are outlining how many we built in each of those categories each year, with a total on the far, I guess that's the far right. And I'm just wondering if I'm reading that correctly. Then we have, for a 10-year period, built all but 467 above moderate units in the first 2 years of the cycle, and we have, oh gosh, I don't know, 1,700 or so extremely low to moderate units that we need to build. Am I before December 28? Am I reading that right?
Yes, you are reading that correct. We only get credit for our RENA up to that 1,406 number for above moderate. So whatever we build beyond that, or whatever's constructed beyond the 1,406 units, we don't get credit for. But yes, there is a lot of work to do in the moderate and below, for sure.
Yeah, wow, definitely. And then my only other question was about on the slide deck. It talked about the timeline, or that for the completion of the Anholm Greenway. And I know that the last time that was before City Council or had any public participation in that process was well over a year ago, probably more. And I'm just wondering what the progress is to that on that to date, and when we think that might be completed.
Yeah, so from the report from circulation, so that's the current stage of that design. It's in the next phases, and it says construction is planned to begin in the second half of 2021, and I'm not exactly sure on an exact completion date on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Quincy?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation, Graham.
Yeah. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Well, I have no questions either. But
Commissioner
let me just quickly just say, I think we've accomplished one heck of a lot in a pandemic year with budget difficulties and staff having to take on other responsibilities, and not just in the community planning area, but just throughout everything. So it's very impressive to see this much work getting done in just a crazy time.
Yep. I don't see any other hands up. I would agree with Commissioner Jorgensen's assessment. When I looked at the report, it seemed like a lot had happened. I'd like to open this up for public comments, if there are any. So could we please check if there are public comments on this item?
Absolutely, Chair Dandekar. At this point, I don't see any hands raised. I just want to remind our attendees that if you would like to make a comment at this time, you need to raise your hand and we will call on you. We'll give you a few seconds. Seeing no hands, there are no public comments for this item.
Thank you. So commissioners, do we have any final discussion on this, or comments, or anything you'd like to have on the record about this report?
Hand raised.
Sorry.
Commissioner Khan wants to speak, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Thank
couldn't.
you. I don't know how to digitally raise my hand. I just was raising my hand. But anyway,
What a concept.
I would like to add to Commissioner Jorgensen's comment that besides all this work he got done, they also did it through a pandemic when we learned how to work from home and work remotely. And I've been working, and it's been a challenge to try to figure it out. So that's on top of everything else. I reviewed the report and I thought it was very interesting. They have done a lot, and it's an interesting city to live in and participate in, and I'm ready to support this document.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't see you. I'm only seeing certain tiles on the screen. I'm not seeing any other. Oh yes, Commissioner Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair Dandekar. I just wanted to, add when we, I guess for a recommendation for my colleagues, when we send this along to the council, just to make a note of maybe prioritizing inclusionary housing. You know, obviously we know it's a part of the work plan, but just making sure that we can ensure that we review that ordinance as soon as it's ready from staff. Thank you.
I had just one question for staff, actually, which was on the retrofitting. Graham, you mentioned that you're coming back to us with a report on in 2021, did you say, on sort of a policy regarding retrofitting of existing older housing in the city?
Yes, under the climate action plan on page 34. And that is on packet page 140. Yeah.
Yes, the city. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Graham.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, the city is pursuing different grant-funded programs and different methods to incentivize fuel switching in the community. So since we're a member of Central Coast Community Energy 3CE, all of the electricity that we use in City of San Luis Obispo is carbon-free. And so as we look at homes and retrofit for energy efficiency, one of the things that we can try to promote is switching from natural gas to all electric. And that's consistent with our clean energy choice program as well, where there are big incentives for developers when they build new to build all electric. So that is a pathway to carbon neutrality or carbon-free buildings that the state of California is pursuing, and the city is on the forefront of that effort. So it's just in the beginning stages, but it is a program in our climate action plan and something that we'll see. It'll be the kind of program that enables a lot of investment in our building stock, because as people fuel switch, as people move to all electric, it's an opportunity to make other types of improvements to their homes, and something that I think is going to be very effective in terms of from a climate action standpoint as well.
Is there any action proposed on retrofitting for upgradation of insulation, of window replacements, any of those kind of more traditional ways of thinking about retrofitting old housing stock?
Oh, sure. That's always part of it. And those programs exist right now, especially for low and moderate income households in the city. They have the ability to get energy improvements done to their housing at very affordable prices, and via a program run by CapsLow. But that's always part of the program when you do energy retrofits, is to make the building as efficient as possible through window upgrades and insulation. And then another component of that can be solar panels and electrification as well.
So besides the low and moderate, Michael, is there any intention to support other income strata? Because a number of these older homes are owned by non-needs groups, but there isn't much incentive for them to upgrade.
Mm-hmm. I do think that there will be incentives in the future. It's something that part of this research and planning for the program is looking at funding sources to try to help people accomplish that for those reasons.
The other thing we've talked about is technical assistance too, that people might just need to know what they can do, even if there isn't a subsidy. And we've talked about that off and on, and I wondered if there was any action in that area.
Yes, we do have that right now, actually. We have technical assistance available for energy projects. So if you're contemplating a project, that is a resource. And it's, I'm going to try to get the contact information for you before the end of the meeting so that we can present that.
So it's energy though, rather than sort of technical aspects of retrofitting along other dimensions, like insulation and windows and so on. Is energy switching?
No, it's our technical assistance is for just all sorts of energy efficiency.
I see. Thank you. Yeah, I would love that link. I think it's a win strategy for us. Thank you. If there are there other comments, or are we ready?
I have some comments, Commissioner Chair Dondekar.
Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, a suggestion on the table 7, the residential growth table that we were looking at earlier. I would just suggest that there be a footnote on that table that makes it clear that the numbers of units and growth rates refer or include the or account for the units that are exempted from the growth management ordinance. So I think that would be helpful because I wasn't clear if those numbers included or excluded the units that are exempted, such as the ADUs and the affordable units. Then I think there are a couple of corrections that I found, but only two out of a very long and comprehensive report. First of all, on packet page 134, where it talks about the Orcutt area specific plan, there's a reference to a potential school site still, and I think that should be deleted because I don't think that's applicable anymore. And then on table 9, also regarding the Orcutt area specific plan development status, that's on packet page 134. It lists the commercial square footage for the Jones property, and there are 2 square footages listed for that property, 10,400 and 15,000, and I think that's double counting the amount of commercial on the Jones property. So those are the corrections I would suggest. So those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, I don't see any hands up from commissioners. So I think we are ready. Yeah, does staff have all the a record of all the suggestions? So yeah. I think we're ready to accept and move on. Thank you very much for your report, Fred. So the next item is staff updates and agenda forecast.
Right. Well, thanks, Chair Dandekar, members of the commission. Looking out to the Planning Commission meeting of March 24th. Right now, we just have one item on that agenda. And that one is, it's reviewing the commercial shopping center at the corner of Broad and Tank Farm Road. And this is, excuse me, this is consisting of 4 commercial buildings and about 61,000 square feet. Total of commercial space there, and it will be coming to the Planning Commission with a recommendation from the Architecture Review Commission. So one item there, and then looking out on the first meeting in April, this is April 14th. Currently, we have 2 items scheduled. The first one is just a minor subdivision. It's in the R1 zone. It's a lot split into 1 lot into 3. And the reason why it's coming to the Planning Commission is there's an exception to the lot frontage requirements. This also includes an environmental document for your review and consideration. Second item on that agenda is it's actually a city-initiated and funded project, and it's to amend the airport area specific plan and the Margarita area specific plan to loosen some restrictions that were in play for childcare facilities. And this is due to some changes that have occurred with some updates to the airport land use plan regarding noise contours. And so this is to be in alignment with that and to provide for some additional childcare opportunities in those specific plan areas. And so those are the 2 items that we'll be looking at out on April 14th. And so that kind of takes us out a couple meetings, and that's the update and forecast I have for the commission. Happy to answer any questions.
Not seeing any questions.
Chairman Dandekar, I have a comment.
Yes.
I will not be at the next meeting on the 24th of this month.
Thank you. So noted.
Thank you.
I don't see any other comments on the agenda forecast, so I think we are ready to close this meeting. Any decisions of the Planning Commission is final unless appealed to City Council within 10 days of the action. Recommendations to City Council can't be appealed since they're not a final action. Any person aggrieved by a decision of the Commission may file an appeal with the City Clerk appeal forms are available at the Community Development Director's office. So with that, I think this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your patience. It's been a long meeting today. Meeting is
Hello.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Bye.
See you
Bye.
later.
See you in 2 weeks. So.
Sure.